I spent 40 years of my life drawing property lines. 40 years walking through woods, wading through creeks, hammering stakes into red clay, and telling people exactly where their land ended and someone else's began. I've seen grown men cry over 6 inches of dirt. I've watched families tear apart over a drainage ditch. I've testified in court 17 times, and every single time the line I drew held up. So when I retired to my 3 acres outside Greenville, Tennessee, I figured the one thing I'd never have to worry about was somebody moving a line on me. I was wrong. My wife Carol passed in 2021. Breast cancer. After that, I didn't do much. I sat on my porch. I drank coffee. I watched the birds hit the feeder. I let the grass grow a little longer than she would have liked. The house next door, a beat-up rancher on about 1.5 acres, sat empty for almost a year after old Mrs. Pemberton went into assisted living. Then, in March of 2023, a man named Dale Burgess bought it. Dale was what they call a real estate flipper around here, though that's a generous term. He bought distressed properties, slapped lipstick on them, and sold them to people moving down from up north who didn't know any better. He had a White Ram 3500, a Yeti cooler permanently mounted in the bed, and the kind of handshake that squeezed too hard. He knew people at the county. He said so within the first 5 minutes of meeting me. I nodded, smiled, went back inside. For the first couple months, it was just noise. Contractors coming and going. A dumpster in the driveway. Power tools at 7 in the morning. I didn't complain. Man's got a right to fix up his property. Then one morning in May, I walked out to get my mail and noticed something. The fence between our properties, a simple post and wire affair that had been there since before Mrs. Pemberton's time, had been moved. Not a lot. Not enough that most people would notice. But I noticed. Because that's what I did for a living. The posts were new. The wire was new. And the line was about 18 inches closer to my house than it should have been. 18 inches doesn't sound like much. But over the length of that fence, roughly 210 feet, that's about 260 square feet of my land. My land. That Dale Burgess had quietly annexed to widen his driveway approach so he could pour a concrete apron for a detached garage he was building in the back. I walked over and knocked on his door. Polite. Calm. I told him the fence had been moved and I'd appreciate it if he put it back. He looked at me with his half grin, the kind you give a dog that's barking at nothing, and said, "I don't think so, bud." Had my guy survey it. That's where the line is. I asked to see the survey. He said he'd get it to me. He never did. I called the county. Spoke to code enforcement. Spoke to the planning office. Spoke to a woman named Denise who sounded like she was eating lunch the entire time. They told me it was a civil matter. Boundary disputes between neighbors weren't something the county got involved in. I'd need to hire a lawyer. Now, I could have hired a lawyer. I could have filed a quiet title action, paid $8,000, and waited 14 months for a court date. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do something more thorough. See, Dale Burgess made an assumption about me. He saw a 71-year-old man living alone in a house with peeling paint and a lawn that needed mowing, and he assumed I was someone who would just absorb the loss. Shrug it off. Let it go. That was a mistake. The first thing I did was pull my own original survey from when I bought the property in 2019. I had the plat, the meaties and bounds description, the iron pins, everything. I went out with my old equipment, my Topcon total station that I'd kept in the garage, and I ran the line myself. I was right, of course. 18¼ inches to be precise. I documented everything. Photos, measurements, GPS coordinates, dated and time-stamped. Then I started looking at Dale's property. Not the fence line. Everything else. 40 years in surveying teaches you something most people don't understand. Every piece of land has a paper trail, and that paper trail is public record. So I went to the County Register of Deeds. I pulled Dale's deed. I pulled Mrs. Pemberton's deed before his. I pulled the subdivision plat from 1974. I pulled every permit application associated with that parcel going back 20 years. And that's when things got interesting. The detached garage Dale was building, no permit. Not applied for, not issued, not pending. He was building a 600 square foot structure with electrical service and no permit whatsoever. In Greene County, that's a stop work order and a fine. But I didn't report it yet. I kept digging. I pulled the septic records from the health department. Mrs. Pemberton's house had a conventional gravity flow septic system designed for a 2-bedroom home. Dale had converted the house to 3 bedrooms and added a half bath. That's a material change in use that requires a septic evaluation and potentially a new system. He hadn't done any of it. The existing drain field was also according to the original installation permit from 1976, partially located in the area where he was now pouring a concrete driveway apron. You cannot put impervious surface over a septic drain field. That's not a county code issue. That's a state environmental violation. I kept going. I looked at the survey Dale claimed to have had done. I filed a public records request for any surveys recorded on his parcel. There was one filed 3 months prior by a company called Ridgeline Land Services out of Morristown. I pulled it. I compared it to the subdivision plat. And I found something that made me sit back in my chair and whistle. The survey was fraudulent. Not sloppy. Not a mistake. Fraudulent. The bearing on the common line between our properties had been altered by 2 degrees. The distance had been shortened by 11 feet. The iron pin at the southeast corner of Dale's lot, which I physically located with a metal detector and found exactly where the 1974 plat said it should be, was shown on Ridgeline's survey as being in a location that didn't exist. Someone had deliberately redrawn that line to give Dale an extra strip of my property. I filed a complaint with the Tennessee Board of Examiners for land surveyors. I included my own survey data, the original plat, and a side-by-side comparison. Then I started making phone calls. Not to lawyers. To the county. To code enforcement. To the health department. To the State Department of Environment and Conservation. I filed formal complaints, written, documented with exhibits for the unpermitted garage, the septic violations, the impervious surface over the drain field, and the encroachment based on a fraudulent survey. I didn't file them all at once. I spaced them out over 6 weeks. 1 per week. Each one triggering a separate inspection, a separate file, a separate enforcement action. I also planted a row of Leyland cypress trees right along my actual property line, 18¼ inches from Dale's new fence. When he came over and asked what I was doing, I smiled and said landscaping. The county couldn't ignore written complaints with documentary evidence. The inspection started in August. The stop work order on the garage came first. Then the septic violation. Then the environmental referral. Each one carried fines. Each one required remediation. The garage had to come down, the driveway had to be torn up, a new septic system had to be engineered and installed. Dale came to my door in September. He wasn't grinning anymore. His face was red and his voice was shaking, and he called me things I won't repeat. He said I had no idea who I was messing with. He said he'd bury me. I told him to get off my property. All of it. The surveyor from Ridgeline had his license suspended pending investigation. Dale's contractor pulled off the job when the liens started stacking up. By November, Dale had over $47,000 in code enforcement fines, remediation costs, and penalties. He couldn't sell the property with the liens attached. He couldn't refinance. He couldn't finish the flip. In January of this year, the county foreclosed on the liens. Dale Burgess lost the property. The whole thing. Not because of a lawsuit, not because of a judge, because of paperwork. Because every violation was real, every complaint was legitimate, and every single line I drew was exactly where it was supposed to be. The new fence came down in February. My cypress trees are about 4 feet tall now. They'll be 20 in a few years. Carol would have liked them. I still sit on my porch. I still drink my coffee. I still watch the birds. But every now and then I look over at that empty lot next door and I think about Dale Burgess and his too-hard handshake, and I allow myself a small, quiet satisfaction. 40 years drawing lines. And nobody moves mine. I spent 41 years measuring land for a living. 41 years walking property lines, reading deeds, driving stakes into dirt, and telling people exactly where their world ended and someone else's began. So when I tell you I know where my property line sits, understand that I don't mean it the way most people do. I don't mean I have a general sense. I mean I could walk it blindfolded at midnight and plant a flag within a quarter inch of the iron pin. That's why what Dale Puckett did to me wasn't just theft. It was an insult. I retired in 2019. Bought 23 acres outside Waynesboro, Tennessee, Lawrence County, right where the hills start folding into each other like knuckles. The place had a 1940s farmhouse, a good well, and silence so deep you could hear your own blood moving. My wife Carol had passed 2 years before. I wasn't looking for a fresh start. I was looking for a place to be still. And for about 14 months, that's exactly what I got. Then Dale moved in next door. He bought the adjacent parcel, 30 acres, in March of 2021. At first, I thought he was running a small hobby kennel. A few dogs, some fencing, nothing to lose sleep over. But by summer, the barking was constant. Not a few dogs. Dozens. He was running a commercial breeding operation, French bulldogs from what I could tell, and he was scaling fast. New kennel buildings went up. Gravel pads got poured. Trucks started coming and going at all hours. I didn't love it, but it was his land. I minded my own business. Then one morning in October, I walked my east fence line the way I always did, coffee in hand, just checking things, and I stopped. The fence was wrong. Not dramatically wrong. Not obviously wrong. But wrong in the way that only a man who spent 4 decades measuring the earth would notice. The chain link fence Dale had installed along our shared boundary wasn't where the old post and wire fence had been. It was south, into my property. I eyeballed it at 6 to 8 feet, a strip running nearly 400 linear feet along the line. That's roughly 3,000 square feet of my land, just absorbed into his operation, like it had always been his. He'd even poured a concrete pad for a new kennel building that was sitting partially on my dirt. I walked over that afternoon, knocked on his door, kept it neighborly, told him I thought his fence crew might have made an error, that the line looked off, and I'd be happy to show him the survey markers. Dale leaned against his doorframe, arms crossed, and smiled at me. "Fence is where my guys put it," he said. "If you've got a problem, call the county." So I did. And that's when I learned how things actually work. When you're a 70-year-old man living alone in rural Tennessee, the county code enforcement office told me boundary disputes were civil matters. The zoning office confirmed Dale had pulled permits for agricultural structures, which in Lawrence County covers commercial breeding operations with almost no oversight. The sheriff's office said they couldn't get involved in a property line disagreement without a court order. Everyone was polite. Everyone was sympathetic. And every single one of them told me it was my problem to solve. Dale, meanwhile, had already started running dogs on the stolen strip. He knew exactly what he'd done. He was betting that a retired old man wouldn't have the energy or the money to fight him. He bet wrong. I pulled my original deed and survey from when I purchased the property. I confirmed every pin, every bearing, every distance. Then I hired a licensed surveyor, a younger guy I had mentored years ago, and had him do a full boundary survey with GPS-corrected coordinates. The result was exactly what I knew it would be. Dale's fence encroached between 7 feet 8 inches and 8 feet 2 inches onto my parcel, along the entire shared boundary. His concrete pad for the new kennel sat 22 inches onto my land. I sent Dale a certified letter with the survey attached, demanding he remove the fence and structures within 30 days. He never responded, so I escalated. I bought a drone. Nothing fancy, a DJI Mini, perfectly legal for recreational use over my own property. I started documenting everything. The encroachment, the number of dogs, the waste runoff that was draining toward my pasture, the trucks coming at 2 and 3 in the morning. I logged dates, times, license plates. I photographed every square foot of that stolen strip from the air, time-stamped and geotagged. I built a file like I was prosecuting a federal case because I knew that when I finally walked into a courtroom, I was only going to get one clean shot. But the drone footage gave me something I hadn't expected. Dale's operation was bigger than what was visible from the road. He had over 60 dogs in various enclosures, many of them in conditions that would make your stomach turn. Stacked crates, standing water, dogs that hadn't seen a veterinarian in God knows how long. I reported it to animal control. They did an inspection, cited him for minor violations, and gave him 60 days to correct. He corrected just enough to pass a follow-up. The system was designed to give people like Dale every possible chance. While I waited for my attorney to file the boundary action, I did something else. Something that changed everything. I went to the Lawrence County Register of Deeds and pulled the complete chain of title for both properties going back to their common origin. My parcel and Dale's had been part of the same farm until 1946, when the original owner subdivided and sold them separately. And in that 1946 deed, the one that created Dale's parcel, there was a restrictive covenant. It was one sentence buried in the legal description, written in the kind of language nobody uses anymore. It said the property was conveyed subject to the condition that it be used solely for residential and traditional agricultural purposes, and that any commercial enterprise conducted on the premises would constitute a violation entitling the grantor or his successors and assigns to pursue all available remedies, including forfeiture. I read that sentence 11 times. Then I called my attorney. Now, deed covenants from the 1940s don't always hold up. Courts have relaxed enforcement of many of them over the decades, especially ones tied to racial restrictions or outdated land use concepts. But this one was different. It was a clear, specific use restriction tied to the character of the land, and Tennessee courts have consistently upheld those when they run with the land, and subsequent buyers have constructive notice, which Dale did because the covenant was recorded in his chain of title. He either didn't read his deed, or he didn't think anyone would ever find it. Either way, it was his problem now. My attorney filed 2 actions simultaneously. The first was a straightforward boundary encroachment suit, seeking removal of the fence and structure's damages for trespass and an injunction. The second was an action to enforce the restrictive covenant, seeking to shut down the commercial breeding operation entirely. Dale hired a lawyer out of Columbia. They filed an answer claiming the covenant was abandoned and unenforceable due to changed conditions in the area. The judge didn't buy it. The area hadn't changed. It was still rural, residential, and small-scale agricultural, exactly as it had been in 1946. There were no other commercial operations within a mile. Dale's own real estate listing when he bought the property described it as a quiet rural homestead. His own purchase documents undermined his defense. The court ruled in my favor on both counts. Dale was ordered to remove the encroaching fence and all structures from my property within 45 days. He was ordered to pay damages for the trespass and my survey and legal costs. And the court enforced the restrictive covenant, ordering him to cease all commercial breeding operations on the property. That last part is what broke him. His entire investment, the kennel, buildings, the infrastructure, the breeding stock, the business he'd built, was predicated on operating from that location. Without it, he had nothing but 30 acres of land with buildings he couldn't legally use. He tried to appeal. His attorney advised him the chances were slim and the cost would be enormous. Within 3 months, Dale put the property up for sale. But here's the thing about selling land with an active restrictive covenant limiting it to residential and traditional agricultural use, it's not worth what you paid for it. Not even close. He sold at a loss. A significant loss. The new buyers are a young couple who raise goats and keep to themselves. The fence is back where it belongs. The concrete pad is gone. The dogs were rehomed through a rescue organization that got involved after my drone footage made its way to the right people. I sit on my porch now in the evenings and it's quiet again. The kind of quiet Carol would have loved. People ask me if I feel bad about what happened to Dale. If I think I went too far. I measured land for 41 years. I know exactly how far is too far. Dale went 8 feet past it. I trusted my sister with my dead husband's money, and she fed it to a food truck. Let me say that again so it lands the way it landed on me. My sister, Denise, my blood, my best friend since we shared a bunk bed in Decatur, took $47,000 that was supposed to send my daughter to college, and she spent it on a rolling kitchen that sells overpriced jerk chicken out of a parking lot off Buford Highway. Every single cent of it. Gone. My husband Marcus died 2 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. The kind that gives you a diagnosis and a countdown in the same sentence. He was 39. Our daughter Zoe was 15. He fought for 11 months, and then one Tuesday morning in November, he just stopped breathing while I was making coffee in the next room. I didn't even get to hold his hand. Marcus was careful. Meticulous. He had a $250,000 life insurance policy through his job at Delta. When it paid out, I was a wreck. I couldn't eat. I couldn't think. I damn sure couldn't manage finances. So when Denise offered to help, she'd done bookkeeping for a dentist's office, she knew QuickBooks, she was family, I said yes without hesitating. I set up a separate account for Zoe's college fund. $47,000 earmarked and untouchable. I made Denise a co-signer so she could manage the account while I managed my grief. That was the worst decision of my life. Zoe got accepted to Spelman this past March. Full of joy, full of plans, already picking out dorm bedding. I was so proud I cried for 2 hours. Marcus would have been over the moon. I told her not to worry about money. Daddy took care of it. And then I logged into the account to start transferring funds for the first tuition installment. The balance was $1,211.43. I stared at the screen for so long and went to sleep. I refreshed it. I called the bank. I asked if there was an error. There was no error. Over the past 14 months, the account had been bled dry through a series of cashier's checks and electronic transfers, all authorized by the cosigner. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the phone. I pulled the transaction history and started scrolling. $5,000 here. $3,000 there. $8,000 in one single withdrawal last October. The payees were a mix. Some went to a business account registered to something called D&R Flavor Co., LLC. Some went to an auto body shop. Some went to a name I recognized. Rodney Price. Denise's boyfriend of 2 years. A man who once borrowed $40 from me and never paid it back. I called Denise. She didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. I texted her, "Call me now." "It's about Zoe's account." She texted back 20 minutes later, "Hey girl, super busy, what's up?" like everything was normal. Like she hadn't hollowed out my daughter's future and used it as startup capital for her boyfriend's dream. I drove to her apartment in Smyrna. She opened the door in a bathrobe, smiling, and I walked past her into the kitchen and put my phone on the counter with the bank statement pulled up. I said, "Where is my daughter's money, Denise?" The smile dropped. Not all at once. It kind of slid off her face in stages, like she was calculating how much I knew before deciding which lie to tell. "It's an investment," she said. That was her opening move. An investment. She said Rodney's food truck was about to take off. They'd been featured on some local blog. They had a catering contract lined up for a church in Marietta. She said the money would come back doubled. She said she was going to surprise me. I asked her when. When was this magical return on investment going to materialize? Because Zoe's first tuition payment was due in 9 weeks. 9 weeks, Denise! She started crying. And here's what kills me. For about 30 seconds, I almost felt bad for her. That's how deep the conditioning runs. She's my older sister. She protected me when we were kids. She held me at Marcus's funeral. My body wanted to comfort her, even while my brain was screaming that she'd stolen from my child. Rodney said it would work, she kept saying. He showed me the numbers. He promised. Rodney. A 44-year-old man who'd been fired from Waffle House, who drove a leased Dodge Charger he couldn't afford, who had Denise so wrapped around his finger that she'd commit financial fraud for him. I asked, "Denise, point blank, did Rodney know where the money came from?" She wouldn't look at me. That was my answer. I lost it. Not screaming, worse. I got quiet. I told her she stole from a dead man's daughter. I told her Marcus worked overtime for years so Zoe wouldn't have to take out loans, and she handed that sacrifice to a man who can't keep a job. I told her she was the one person I trusted after I lost everything, and she used that trust like a credit card. She grabbed my arm and said, "I'm your sister. I would never hurt you on purpose." I pulled away. "You didn't do this by accident, Denise. You wrote checks. You made transfers. You did it 14 times. Over 14 months. That's not a mistake. That's a plan." She begged me not to go to the police. She said it would destroy the family. She said our mother would never recover. She said give Rodney 6 months and he'd pay it all back. 6 months. Zoe's tuition was due in 9 weeks. Spellman doesn't take IOUs from food truck entrepreneurs. I left her apartment and sat in my car in the parking lot for 45 minutes. I called my mother. I told her everything. She was silent for a long time, and then she said something that broke me all over again. "I wish you hadn't told me that." Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "That's wrong." She wished I'd kept it to myself. Because now she'd have to choose sides, and choosing sides meant losing a daughter, either way. I went home and told Zoe. She deserved to know. She sat on her bed with her Spellman acceptance letter pinned to the corkboard behind her, and she didn't cry. She just nodded slowly, like she was absorbing a blow she'd been half expecting her whole life, the universe taking something good away the way it took her father. That look on my 17-year-old daughter's face, that resignation, that's what made my decision for me. I filed a police report the next morning. I hired a lawyer that afternoon, a woman named Tasha, who specialized in financial fraud and didn't flinch when I told her the thief was my sister. I also contacted Spellman's financial aid office, explained my situation, and begged for an extension. They gave me one. 12 weeks instead of 9. Denise called me 19 times that week. I answered once. She screamed at me. She said I was tearing the family apart. She said I was choosing money over blood. I said, "No, Denise, you did that. I'm just filling out the paperwork." Rodney's food truck, by the way, failed. Shut down 6 weeks after I filed the report. Health code violations and a lease he couldn't pay. $47,000 gone into cooking equipment that got repossessed. A truck wrap that's now peeling in a storage lot, and rent for a commissary kitchen he used for 4 months. My lawyer got a judgment against Denise for the full amount plus legal fees. She doesn't have it. Rodney certainly doesn't have it. We've started garnishment proceedings, which means I'll get it back in small, humiliating installments over the next several years. Zoe started at Spelman this fall. I took out a parent loan to cover the gap. It'll take me a decade to pay off. I work nights now on top of my day job sorting packages at a UPS hub so the interest doesn't eat me alive. My mother still talks to Denise. She still talks to me. But she talks to us separately now, like we're two halves of a broken plate she keeps in different drawers. Thanksgiving is coming up and nobody's mentioned it. Denise sent me a text last week. It said, "I'm sorry. I love you. Can we talk?" I read it. I put my phone down. And I went to my second job. Some debts don't get repaid with money. And some family bonds aren't bonds at all. They're just habits you haven't broken yet. I was 23 steps into the happiest walk of my life when I saw him. Third row aisle, seat right side. Gray suit I didn't recognize. Same jaw. Same cold, pale eyes that used to pin me to the wall before his hands ever touched me. My father. Sitting in my wedding, smiling at me like he had every right to be there. My bouquet started shaking before I understood why. My body knew before my brain caught up. It always does with him. Let me back up. I met Daniel my junior year of college. He was kind in a way that confused me at first because I'd never really experienced kindness from a man without conditions attached. We dated for 3 years before he proposed, and in that time, I told him everything. The cigarette burns on my left shoulder blade, the fractured wrist when I was 9 that my mother told the ER was from a bicycle accident, the years of silence after I finally cut my father off at 17 when I moved in with my aunt and uncle and started the slow, brutal work of learning that not every closed door meant someone was coming to hurt me. Daniel held me through all of it. He never pushed. He never minimized. And when we started planning the wedding, there was exactly one non-negotiable. I laid on the table my father would not be there. Not invited. Not informed. Not mentioned. I hadn't spoken to him in 7 years, and I intended to keep it that way. Daniel agreed immediately. He told his family. He was clear about it. Or at least I thought he was. His mother, Patricia, is the kind of woman who smiles while she's cutting you. She's got this way of making everything sound reasonable, even when it's insane. When I first told her briefly, without details, because she didn't deserve my details, that my father wouldn't be at the wedding, she tilted her head and said, "Oh, sweetheart, every father deserves to see his daughter get married." I said no. Daniel said no. We said no together, separately and in writing. When we sent out the invitations and his name wasn't on any list. I thought that was the end of it. Patricia had other plans. I found out later after everything fell apart exactly what she did. She went through Daniel's phone while he was in the shower one weekend they visited. Found my father's name in an old contact list Daniel had saved from my phone years ago, back when I still kept the number just in case I ever needed a restraining order. Patricia took that number. She called my father. She told him the date, the venue, the time. She told him his daughter would love to have him there, but was too proud to ask. She fabricated an entire reconciliation narrative in her head. And then she made it real. The vineyard was small. 60 guests. October light coming through the grape leaves, golden and soft, the kind of light that makes everything look like a painting. I'd chosen this place because it felt safe. Intimate. Controllable. I could see every face from the altar. That was the point. My aunt walked me down the aisle. She was the one who saved me, who took me in, who sat with me through the nightmares. She was crying before we even started walking. I was holding it together, smiling, looking toward Daniel at the end of the aisle in his navy suit, and I was thinking, this is it. This is the moment my life starts being mine. Then my eyes drifted right, and there he was. My aunt felt me stop. She squeezed my arm and whispered, "What's wrong?" I couldn't speak. I physically could not form words. My throat closed like it used to when I was small, when making noise meant making it worse. I just stared at him, and he stared back with this smug, satisfied grin like he'd won something. My aunt followed my gaze. I heard her breath catch. She said one word under her breath that I won't repeat, and then she said, "You don't have to do this." The music was still playing. People were starting to notice I'd stopped. Daniel looked confused at the altar. And I was standing in the middle of the aisle in my grandmother's altered wedding dress, vibrating with a kind of rage and terror I hadn't felt in years. I looked at Daniel. I looked at his face, searching for guilt, for knowledge, for anything. He looked genuinely confused. Then I looked at Patricia seated in the front row, left side. She was beaming. Not at me. At my father. This satisfied, self-righteous beam like she'd just pulled off the most beautiful surprise. Like she was the hero of this story. And that's when I knew exactly who had done this. I turned to my aunt and said, "Hold my flowers." Then I walked. Not toward the altar, toward Patricia. The music stopped. Someone murmured. I didn't care. I stopped directly in front of her and I said loud enough for the first 3 rows to hear, "Did you invite him?" She blinked. Put her hand on her chest. "Sweetheart, I just thought." "Did you invite him?" "He's your father." And I thought, on a day like this, he broke my arm when I was 9 years old. The vineyard went silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that has weight. Patricia's face went through about 4 expressions in 2 seconds. Shock. Doubt. A flicker of something that might have been shame. And then, this is the part that still makes my blood run cold, she settled on irritation. Like I was being dramatic. Like I was ruining her moment. "Well," she said quietly, "I'm sure there are 2 sides to every..." "He put cigarettes out on my back, Patricia." My voice cracked, but it didn't break. "I told you he was dangerous. Daniel told you. We told you why. And you went behind our backs and brought him here. To my wedding. The one place I was supposed to be safe. Daniel was beside me now. I don't know when he'd moved from the altar. He looked at his mother, and I watched something die in his eyes. "Mom," he said. "What did you do?" She started crying. Of course she did. The tears came on cue, perfectly timed, and she grabbed Daniel's arm and said, "I was trying to give her a complete family. I was trying to help." I stepped back from both of them. I looked at my father, who hadn't moved, who was watching all of this with that same detached amusement he always had, like other people's pain was entertainment. Then I looked at Daniel and I said the hardest sentence of my life. "If she stays, I go." He didn't hesitate. Not even for a second. He turned to his mother and said, "You need to leave. Now. And take him with you." Patricia gasped like she'd been slapped. "You can't be serious. I'm your mother. I'm not leaving my own son's wedding. You just made my wife's abuser a wedding guest. Get up." His brother stood and quietly took Patricia's arm. My uncle, 6'4", and not in the mood for diplomacy, walked to the 3rd row and stood over my father until he got up and left without a word. because men like my father are only brave behind closed doors. We didn't get married that day. We got married 3 weeks later in my aunt's backyard with 11 people present. I wore jeans and the veil from my grandmother's dress. Daniel's father came. His brother came. Patricia was not invited. She sent 14 letters since then. I've read none of them. Daniel's read 2. He says they're mostly about how ungrateful we are, how she sacrificed everything for that wedding, how I've poisoned her son against her. Not a single apology. Not one acknowledgement of what she actually did. My therapist says Patricia and my father operate from the same playbook. Different chapters, same book. They both believe their version of reality is the only one that matters, and anyone who challenges it is the enemy. Daniel cut contact with her 2 months after the wedding. That was his choice. I never asked him to, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't relieved. People ask me sometimes if I regret not just walking down the aisle that day, pushing through it, not letting them ruin the moment. No. Because standing still in that aisle, refusing to move forward into a ceremony contaminated by the woman who betrayed me, that was the most powerful thing I've ever done. I spent my entire childhood frozen. Compliant. Silent. That day I stopped walking because I chose to. And that made all the difference. I used to run marathons for the silence. For those hours where the only voice in my head was my own breathing, my own heartbeat, my own 2 feet hitting pavement in a rhythm that told me I was alive. I need you to remember that. I need you to remember that I was a woman who ran 26 miles for fun, because what I'm about to tell you is the story of how a doctor looked at that woman, looked at me 17 times over 2 years, and told me the thing trying to kill me was all in my head. My name is Claire. I'm 34. I live in Lakewood, Colorado, about 15 minutes west of Denver, in a neighborhood with good schools and wide sidewalks, and the kind of quiet that makes you think nothing bad can happen here. I've been running competitively since college. Half marathons, full marathons, a couple of ultras. I'm not elite. I'm not sponsored. But I'm serious. I train 5 days a week. I track my splits. I know my body the way a mechanic knows an engine. I can feel when something's off by a fraction of a second, a half beat too many. And in March of 2021, something was off. It started small. A heaviness in my chest during tempo runs, like someone had laid a sandbag across my sternum. I'd finish a 6-mile loop and need to sit in my car for 20 minutes before I could drive home. My resting heart rate, which had been a steady 52 for years, crept up to 68, then 74. I was tired in a way that sleep didn't fix, a bone-deep exhaustion that made me feel like I was dragging my skeleton through wet concrete. So I did what you're supposed to do. I made an appointment with my primary care physician, Dr. Nathan Harold, who I'd been seeing for 3 years. I sat on that crinkly paper in his exam room and I told him everything. The fatigue, the chest pressure, the heart rate climb. I told him my aunt died at 41 from a cardiac rhabdomyoma, a rare tumor that grew inside her heart. I told him my grandmother had one removed at 56. I told him I wanted imaging, an echocardiogram, a CT scan. Something. He listened. He nodded. He checked my blood pressure normal. Listened to my heart with a stethoscope for maybe 8 seconds. Then he leaned back in his chair and said, "Claire, you're a young, healthy, athletic woman. This sounds like anxiety." He prescribed me sertraline, an SSRI, for the anxiety he decided I had in the span of a 10-minute appointment. I took it because he was the doctor. Because I thought maybe he was right. Maybe the pandemic had gotten to me. Maybe I was stressed about work, about my marriage, about the 1,000 small things that pile up when you're not paying attention. I took the sertraline for 6 weeks and felt nothing change, except now I also couldn't sleep. I went back. Appointment number 2. I told him the medication wasn't helping. I told him the chest pressure was worse. I told him I'd had to drop out of a half marathon at mile 9 because I felt like I was breathing through a coffee straw. He increased my dose. He told me exercise-induced anxiety was more common than people think. He told me to try yoga. I want to be very clear about something. I was not hysterical. I was not vague. Every single time I walked into that office, I came with data. Heart rate logs from my Garmin, training notes, a printed family medical history that I had highlighted and organized. I handed him a folder, a literal folder at appointment number 4 with my aunt's death certificate and my grandmother's surgical records. He flipped through it, set it on the counter, and said, "Family history doesn't mean destiny, Claire. Let's not go looking for problems." Let's not go looking for problems. That sentence lives in my chest now like a shard of glass. Over the next 18 months, I went back 15 more times. 17 total visits. The symptoms escalated in ways that were impossible to ignore, except apparently they were very possible to ignore if you'd already decided your patient was an anxious woman who needed to calm down. I developed a dry cough that wouldn't quit. I started getting dizzy, standing up. I had episodes where my heart would race to 160 while I was sitting on my couch watching television. I lost 11 pounds without trying. My face looked gray in photographs. At appointment number 9, I cried. I sat there and cried and said, "Something is wrong with me. Please just order a scan." He handed me a tissue and referred me to a therapist. At appointment number 12, I brought my husband Matt because I'd read that women are taken more seriously when a man corroborates their symptoms. Dr. Harold told Matt that I was hyper-focused on health and that it was feeding the anxiety cycle. Matt squeezed my hand in the parking lot afterward and said, "We'll figure this out." But I could see it in his eyes, the flicker of doubt, the wondering if maybe the doctor was right. And that's the thing that almost broke me. Not the pain, not the exhaustion, the loneliness of screaming into a void shaped like a man with a medical degree who decided what I was before I ever opened my mouth. At appointment number 15, I asked for a referral to a cardiologist. He said it wasn't warranted. I asked if I could get one anyway. He said he wouldn't feel comfortable referring me for unnecessary testing because it could, and I swear on my life, these were his words, reinforce the anxiety pattern. I should have found another doctor. I know that. Everyone says that. But here's what people don't understand. I was exhausted. I was running on fumes. I was spending every spare ounce of energy just trying to function, to work, to train at a fraction of what I used to keep showing up to a life that felt like it was slowly dimming. Finding a new primary care doctor in the Denver metro area with my insurance meant a 4-month wait. I was on 3 waiting lists. I was trying. On October 8th, 2023, I ran the Denver Rock and Roll Marathon. I shouldn't have. I knew I shouldn't have, but I've been training for it for a year, and some stubborn, furious part of me needed to prove to Dr. Harold, to myself, to whatever was happening inside my body, that I was still me, that I was still the woman who ran marathons for the silence. I made it to mile 25. I could see the finish line. I could hear the crowd. And then the world tilted sideways and the pavement came up to meet my face and everything went black. I woke up in the ER, Swedish Medical Center, with an oxygen mask on my face and a cardiologist named Dr. Priya Anand standing over me with an expression I will never forget. It wasn't pity. It wasn't panic. It was controlled professional rage. They'd done a CT scan within 20 minutes of my arrival. Standard protocol for a collapse with cardiac symptoms. And there it was. A tumor the size of a tennis ball, a cardiac fibroma pressing against my left atrium, compressing my pulmonary veins, slowly strangling my heart's ability to pump blood. It had been growing for years. It was clearly visible, unmistakable, the kind of thing that would have shown up on any imaging ordered at any point in the previous 24 months. Dr. Anand sat on the edge of my bed and said, "Who is your primary care physician?" And when I told her how many times I'd asked for a scan, she closed her eyes for a long moment and then said very quietly, "I'm so sorry, Claire." I had surgery 11 days later. They cracked my sternum open and removed a mass that had been slowly killing me, while a man with a stethoscope told me to try yoga. The tumor was benign, not cancerous, but its location meant it had caused structural damage to my heart that may be permanent. I may never run a marathon again. I may never run at all. My cardiologist says we won't know the full extent of the damage for another year. I filed a formal complaint with the Colorado Medical Board in November. In January, I retained a malpractice attorney. We have all 17 visit records. We have my written requests for imaging documented in his own notes, dismissed in his own handwriting. We have the family history I provided, which he acknowledged receiving and chose to disregard. We have a tumor that was large enough and positioned clearly enough that 3 independent radiologists have now confirmed it would have been detectable on imaging as early as mid-2021. Dr. Harold's attorney has responded. Their defense is that his clinical judgment was reasonable given the presentation. That anxiety is a valid diagnosis, that I was free to seek a second opinion at any time. And that last part is what keeps me up at night, because they're going to use my own persistence, the fact that I kept coming back to him instead of leaving as evidence that I trusted his judgment. They're going to use my loyalty against me. But here's what I know. I know that I walked into that office 17 times and begged a man to look harder. I know that I brought receipts, literal documented, highlighted receipts, and he set them on the counter and didn't look. I know that my aunt is dead and my grandmother has a scar down her chest, and I told him that, and he called it anxiety. I know that a tennis ball was growing against my heart while he told me to breathe deeper. I'm not running anymore. Not right now. Maybe not ever. But I am not done fighting. Because the silence I used to chase on those long runs, I found a different kind now. It's the silence of a doctor's office where no one is listening. And I'm going to make sure that silence is so loud, it's the last thing Dr. Nathan Harold ever hears. I know what a dog sounds like when it's given up. Not barking. Not whining. Just this low, rhythmic thud of a skull hitting drywall over and over like a metronome counting down to something terrible. I know that sound because I listened to it for 4 months through my ceiling and nobody, not the landlord, not the police, not animal control, would do a damn thing about it. My name is Diane. I'm 63. I spent 31 years as a veterinary nurse, the last 12 in emergency medicine, which means I've held animals while they died in ways that would make you stop eating for a week. I retired to this apartment in downtown Portland because it was quiet, because the building had thick walls, and because I thought I was done witnessing suffering I couldn't stop. I was wrong. They moved in on a Saturday in June. Jake and Marin, late 20s, good looking, the kind of couple that walks into a room and everyone notices. They carried in a succulent, a ring light, and a 60-pound Belgian Malinois on a retractable leash. I was in the lobby getting my mail. The dog locked eyes with me immediately, hyper alert, panting, pulling so hard the leash mechanism was screaming. I recognized the breed instantly. Malinois are what the military uses to chase down insurgents. They need 4 to 6 hours of intense physical and mental stimulation every single day. They are not pets. They are barely domesticated chaos wrapped in fur and muscle. I smiled and said, "Beautiful dog. You two have experience with working breeds." Jake laughed and said, "Nah, we just thought he looked sick. Like a wolf, you know, his name's Ghost." Marin held up her phone and snapped a photo of Ghost in the lobby. "He's gonna blow up our page," she said. I went back to my apartment and sat down and stared at the wall for a long time. The first 2 weeks weren't bad. I'd hear them come and go, hear Ghost's nails clicking on the hardwood above me, hear the occasional bark. Normal dog and apartment sounds. I told myself maybe I was being judgmental. Maybe they'd hire a walker. Maybe they had a plan. They did not have a plan. By week 3, the pattern emerged. They left together every morning around 8. Ghost would start barking within 20 minutes. Not casual barking, frantic, repetitive, escalating barking that would continue for hours. I could hear him running laps in the studio, which couldn't have been more than 400 square feet. Around 6 or 7, sometimes later, they'd come home. 30 minutes of quiet. Then they'd leave again, bars, dinners, whatever people with ring lights do at night. Ghost would start up again. They'd stumble back at midnight, 1 in the morning. I started keeping a log. October 3rd, I wrote, "Barking began 8 to 2 a.m. Continuous until 1147 a.m. Resumed 1215 p.m. Sounds of scratching at door. Whimpering from approximately 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Impact sounds dog throwing itself against walls or furniture 4:30 p.m. I filled an entire notebook in 6 weeks. I tried talking to them first. Of course I did. I went upstairs on a Wednesday evening, knocked politely, and Marin answered with, "Ghost behind her, and I swear to you that dog had already changed. His eyes were different. Bite her." He was pacing behind her in tight circles, and there were scratch marks gouged into the back of the door so deep I could see raw wood from the hallway. I kept it gentle. I said I could hear ghosts during the day, and that Malinois really need a lot of exercise and stimulation, and would they consider a dog walker or daycare? Marin's face went cold. She said, "He's fine. He's just adjusting." Jake appeared behind her shirtless and said, "We watched Caesar Milan. We got it handled." They closed the door. 2 weeks later, I called the building manager. He said dogs were allowed under the lease and there was nothing he could do about barking during daytime hours. I called Portland's noise complaint line. They told me animal noise complaints were handled by animal control. I called animal control. A woman named Trish took my report and said someone would do a welfare check. No one came for 11 days. When an officer finally visited, Jake and Marin were home. Ghost was calm because they were there. The officer saw food and water, saw no visible injuries, and closed the case. Trish called me back and said, "The animal appears to be in adequate condition. It's not illegal to own a dog, ma'am." I wanted to reach through the phone. By November, the sounds changed. The barking decreased, which might sound like improvement, but it wasn't. It was worse. Ghost had entered a phase I'd seen in shelter dogs, headed for behavioral euthanasia, learned helplessness mixed with compulsive behaviors. I could hear him above me doing the same loop, the same circuit for hours. Pace, 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 turn. Pace, 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 turn. And then the head banging started. This dull, sickening thump against the wall, rhythmic and relentless. I recorded it on my phone. 37 minutes of continuous thumping. I sent it to Animal Control. I sent it to the Oregon Humane Society. I sent it to 3 different rescue organizations that specialized in Malinois. I posted it on neighborhood forums. The Humane Society said they couldn't intervene without evidence of physical abuse or starvation. The rescue said they could offer to rehome the dog, but couldn't force a surrender. The neighborhood forum told me I was being a Karen. One person said, and I quote, "Maybe mind your own business, boomer." I went upstairs again in December. This time, I didn't knock politely. I pounded. Jake answered, and behind him, I could see Ghost in the corner of the studio, and there was blood on the wall. Not a lot. Enough. The dog had been hitting his head so hard he'd split the skin above his eye. There was a cone of destruction around him, shredded couch cushions, a demolished shoe rack, blinds ripped from the window, and Ghost just sat there trembling, staring at nothing. I said, "That dog is suffering. He's self-mutilating. You need to surrender him to a rescue or I will make your lives very, very difficult." Jake stepped into the hallway and got close to my face. He said, "Lady, we spent $2,000 on that dog. He's ours. If you call anyone again, I'm filing a harassment complaint." Marin appeared behind him, phone already recording me. "We're documenting this," she said. "You're harassing us." I went back downstairs. I sat on my couch and I listened to Ghost resume his circuit above me. Pace, 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 turn. I called a lawyer the next morning. A friend from the veterinary world connected me with an animal law attorney in Salem. She reviewed my logs, my recordings, my photos of the gouged door I'd taken from the hallway. She said Oregon's animal neglect statute requires evidence of failure to provide minimum care, which includes adequate space exercise and mental stimulation for the species and breed. She said my documentation was strong. She said we could file a complaint with the district attorney's office and push for an investigation with teeth. It took 2 more months. 2 more months of thumping, 2 more months of pacing, 2 more months of lying in bed at 3 a.m. listening to an animal lose its mind 12 feet above my head while its owner slept through it or weren't even home. The DA's office sent an investigator in February. This one was different. She was a former vet tech herself, and she showed up unannounced on a Tuesday at noon when Jake and Marin were at work. The building manager led her into the hallway outside the apartment. She could hear Ghost from the corridor. She recorded the sounds, the pacing, the thumping, the low moaning that had replaced the barking entirely. She documented the scratch marks visible under the door. She noted the smell. When Jake and Maren came home that evening, there was a notice on their door. Formal investigation. Mandatory veterinary evaluation of the animal within 72 hours. They surrendered Ghost the next day. Didn't even fight it. Maren posted an Instagram story about it, a teary selfie with the caption, "Sometimes love means letting go," and a broken heart emoji. It got 400 likes. Ghost went to a Malinois specific rescue in Bend. I called them every week for 2 months. The first report was bad. He was reactive, compulsive, terrified of enclosed spaces. He couldn't be in a room with a closed door without spiraling. But they worked with him. A trainer who specialized in working breed rehabilitation took him on. Slow exposure, structured exercise, purpose. The last time I called, they told me Ghost was living on a 10-acre property with a retired K9 handler. He was doing scent work. He was swimming in a river every morning. He was okay. Jake and Maren got a cat 2 months later. I try not to think about it. I try to tell myself a cat is different. A cat can handle a studio apartment. A cat doesn't need what Ghost needed. And maybe that's true. But some nights I still lie awake and listen to the ceiling, just in case.
I know how this looks. I know what you've heard, what he's probably told everyone. I'm the villain, the cheating wife who threw away a perfectly good marriage for a fling. I get it. From the outside, that's what it is. He was a good man, a great father, and I broke his heart. But stories are never that simple, are they? His version leaves out the years of silence. The slow, crushing weight of being married to a man who shared my house but not my life. I loved my husband once. I really did. When we were in our 20s, he was everything. He was strong and dependable, the kind of guy who could fix anything and made you feel safe. He was a rock. But the thing about rocks is, they don't change. They don't grow. And I was growing so fast I felt like I was going to burst out of my own skin. I climbed the ladder at my job, I read books, I followed the news, I wanted to talk about politics and art and new business ideas. I'd come home from a 12-hour day, my mind buzzing, and I'd try to tell him about a project I was leading or an interesting article I'd read. He'd just nod, eyes glued to the TV, and say, "That's nice, honey." Then he'd ask what was for dinner. It was like shouting into a void. I begged him to find a passion, to get a career beyond his personal training gigs, to come out with my friends instead of just wanting to hang out with his gym buddies. He was happy. That was the most infuriating part. He was perfectly content with his routine gym, kids, TV, sleep. His contentment felt like a jail sentence for me. I felt so incredibly, profoundly alone, especially at night, lying next to this warm body that felt 1,000,000 miles away. So I started to build my own world. I threw myself into my fitness. He probably told you I was doing it to get attention, to look good for someone else. The truth is, it was the one thing I could control. My body. I could make it stronger, push it to its limits, and feel powerful for an hour a day when the rest of my life felt so powerless. The new clothes, the makeup, that was armor. It was me trying to look on the outside like the successful, confident woman I was at work instead of the tired, invisible wife I was at home. My phone became my secret garden. It was the only place I could be myself. I'd text my friends, read articles he'd never understand, and just escape. That's why I guarded it so fiercely. It wasn't about hiding a man. It was about protecting the last piece of me that was still mine. And the intimacy, it just died. It wasn't a conscious decision to reject him. How can you be physically close to someone you can't even have a real conversation with? Lying there, letting him touch me felt like the biggest lie of all. It was easier to just say I was tired. Every no was a symptom of a deeper sickness. I was starving for connection, for a single person to see me, the real me, and not just the role I was playing. Then I found one, my coworker Mark. And no, it didn't start the way you think. It wasn't lust or a cheap thrill. It started with a conversation. We were working on a huge project together, spending late nights at the office. One night I made a dry, sarcastic joke, the kind my husband would never get. Mark didn't just laugh. He came right back with a better one. It was like a light turned on in a dark room. He challenged my ideas. He debated with me. He saw me as a smart, capable person, not just a wife and a mom. He was in a dead marriage, too. We started talking, just venting to each other. Soon we were texting. At first it was about work, then it was about our lives, our frustrations, our dreams. Those late-night texts became my lifeline. I'd lie in bed next to my sleeping husband, the blue light of the screen on my face. Finally feeling seen. I could tell Mark things I hadn't said out loud to anyone. For the first time in a decade, I wasn't just someone's wife. I was myself. The work trip was coming up. It was a conference at a tropical resort, a week of intense presentations and networking. Mark and I were both leading a major session. I was nervous and excited. My husband just grunted when I told him about it. He asked if the hotel had a good gym. That was it. No good luck, no I'll miss you, just the gym. That trip changed everything. During the day we were professionals, totally focused. But at night, after the dinners and forced socializing, we'd find a quiet spot by the beach and just talk for hours. We talked about the people we used to be and the people we wanted to become. Under the stars, with the sound of the ocean in the background, all the walls came down. The line between friends and something more just disappeared. It happened. We crossed it. And it didn't feel like a sordid, cheap affair. It felt like coming home. It was a betrayal of my marriage vows, I know that. But it felt like an affirmation of myself, of the woman I had become, who needed more than a quiet life, and a husband who didn't get her. When I got home, the silence in my house was louder than ever. The texting with Mark didn't stop. It got more intense. It was the only thing keeping me sane. A few weeks later, I was lying in bed typing out a long message to him. My husband was next to me, breathing deeply. I thought he was fast asleep. He always was by this time. The house was dark and quiet, the only light coming from my screen. I was smiling at something Mark wrote, feeling that familiar spark of connection. Suddenly the mattress shifted. Before I could even register what was happening, his arms snaked around me. It wasn't a hug. It was heavy, deliberate. "What are you smiling at?" he asked, his voice low and strange, not sleepy at all. My heart hammered against my ribs. I tried to angle the phone away, my thumb moving to lock the screen. "Nothing," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Just a funny video." He didn't answer. He just tightened his grip. His other hand came up not to caress my face, but to grab for my wrist, the one holding the phone. I realized with a jolt of pure ice in my veins that he hadn't been sleeping at all. He had been waiting. "It's nothing, just leave it," I said, my voice shaking as I tried to pull my wrist free. It was useless. He's a big guy, a professionally trained martial artist, and when he decided he wanted something, that was it. What happened next wasn't a fight. A fight implies two sides have a chance. This was just him taking what he wanted. He rolled on top of me, pinning me to the mattress with his weight. He started laughing, but it was a horrible, ugly sound. It wasn't a real laugh. It was for show a performance of being the playful husband, while his eyes were cold and furious. He wrestled the phone from my hand like he was taking a toy from a child. I felt so small, so completely powerless. He held it just out of my reach, my own phone, my private world used as a tool to humiliate me. "Let's see what's so funny," he said, that fake laugh gone now. He unlocked it with my face and started scrolling. The room was dead silent except for the sound of his thumb swiping across the screen. I just lay there frozen, watching his expression shift from suspicion to a kind of dark certainty. I saw his eyes pause, and I knew exactly what he was reading. The text from the trip, the late-night confessions, then his face went hard as granite. I knew he'd found the one where I'd called him the animal. It was a cruel, stupid thing to type, born from a moment of pure frustration, but seeing it through his eyes, I felt sick. He didn't yell. He didn't scream. He did something much worse. He looked at me, then at the phone, and pressed Mark's name. He put it on speaker. My blood ran cold. The phone rang once, twice. Then Mark's sleepy voice came through the speaker. "Hey, you." My husband's voice was unnaturally calm. "Is this Mark?" There was a long pause. "Who is this?" "This is her husband," he said, his eyes locked on mine. "I think you and I need to have a little chat about what you've been doing with my wife." I couldn't breathe. I just listened in horror as Mark stammered, denied everything, and then fell silent as my husband read one of our texts out loud. It was over in less than a minute. Mark hung up. My husband slowly lowered the phone and just looked at me. The silence was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. "So," he said, his voice flat. "Talk." I tried to deny it. I tried to lie. I said we were just friends, that he was just helping me with work stress. I admitted it was an emotional affair, that I'd crossed a line with what I said, but that's all it was. I was talking fast, trying to build a wall of words to protect myself, but he just sat there listening completely unmoved. I realized now he was probably recording me. He had a plan. This man, who I thought was so simple, so straightforward, had been playing a long game. He let me talk myself out, and when I was done, he just said, "The resort? Did you sleep with him?" The question hung in the air. The look in his eyes told me he already knew the answer. There was no point in lying anymore. My whole body sagged, and I finally whispered yes. He nodded once, a short, sharp gesture. He didn't explode. He didn't break anything. He just stood up, went to the closet, and pulled out a suitcase. He threw it on the bed. "Pack your things," he said. "I want you out of my house. Tonight." I was in shock. I never ever thought he would do that. I was the breadwinner. I paid the mortgage. In my arrogant, stupid mind, I thought that gave me power, some kind of control. I thought we would fight, we would go to therapy, we would figure out the mess I'd made. I never thought he would just end it. The fallout was fast and brutal. I left that night and went to a hotel. I called Mark. He didn't pick up. The next day, he sent me a short text saying he was going to try and save his own marriage and that he was sorry. Just like that, the one person I thought truly saw me was gone. I was completely alone. My husband filed for divorce immediately. His lawyer had everything: copies of my texts, a recording of my confession, my financial records. The simple man I had underestimated had been methodically building a case to destroy me. My world collapsed. My friends took sides. My work suffered. All the armor I had built for myself, the career, the money, was turned into a weapon and used against me. We ended up with 50/50 custody of the kids, which is the only thing that matters. But the final humiliation came with the finances. Because I earned so much more than him, I was ordered to pay him spousal support. A significant amount every single month. So now here we are. I work myself to the bone just to keep my head above water, to pay for my apartment and his house. He gets to live the exact same life he always wanted, working out, training a few clients, picking up the kids from school, only now I'm paying for it. He's the victim. The strong, stoic man who was wronged. He probably tells everyone he's a wreck, but from what I hear, he's never been happier. He thinks he won. He blew up my world, shattered the life I had built, and left me with the pieces. He's not wrong. He did. But he will never understand that he was the one who lit the fuse. He'll never see the thousands of tiny moments, the years of quiet, neglect, and intellectual loneliness that made the whole thing so fragile in the first place. He didn't just lose a wife. He lost a woman he never really knew. And I lost myself trying to be someone he could love, and then lost everything else when I finally found her. My name is Mike. I'm 31, and if you're reading this, you've probably already heard my wife's version of the story. I'm sure I sound like a monster. The husband who cheated. The guy who planned to ruin her. I get it. From the outside it looks simple. But nothing is ever that simple. 5 years ago I married Sarah. We were a team. It was us against the world, building a life from scratch. We both worked, we split the bills, we talked about everything. When our son Leo was born 3 years ago, it felt like we had everything. He was this perfect little person we made together. We were solid. Then Sarah's career took off. She's brilliant, I've always known that, and she got a manager position at her firm. The money was great, better than I was making. At first I was her biggest cheerleader. I was so damn proud. I'd brag about her to my friends. That's my wife, I'd say. But slowly something started to change. We became she. Our life started to revolve around her job. Dinners out were always with her colleagues, and the conversation was always about her latest project, her team's success, her quarterly goals. I'd just sit there and nod the supportive husband. I went from being Mike to being Sarah's husband. At home, she'd walk in the door, drop her bag, and just vent about her day for an hour. Her stress, her deadlines, her annoying coworker. I'd listen, of course. That's what a husband does. But when I tried to talk about my day, about my job, her eyes would glaze over. It was like my life was too small to register on her radar. My world became about logistics. I was the one who had to leave work early if Leo was sick. I was the one who handled daycare pickup and drop-off because her schedule was too important. I wasn't a partner anymore. I was support staff. My own ambitions, my own problems, they all just seemed to fade into the background. She probably told you I've been distant and argumentative lately. She's not wrong. I was trying to fight for my place in our marriage. An argument was the only time I felt like she was actually looking at me, even if it was with anger. I was trying to claw my way back into the story of our life, but she was the only one holding the pen. The COVID lockdowns made it 100 times worse. She set up her office in our spare room, and her work life just took over our entire apartment. She was more powerful and present than ever, barking orders on Zoom calls, while I felt like I was shrinking in my own home. I was just the guy who had to keep a 3-year-old quiet so the important work could get done. That's when I met Chloe. It was early 2019, before the world shut down completely. She works at a coffee shop I used to go to near my office. She's 20. And before you judge, you need to understand it wasn't about her age or even about sex, not really. It was about being seen. When I talked to her, she actually listened. She'd ask me about my job, like it mattered. She laughed at my stupid jokes. She looked at me like I was a man, not just an accessory to a successful woman. With her, I felt like the main character for the first time in years. It was a relief. It was a pathetic, selfish relief, but it felt like breathing after being underwater for too long. The fighting with Sarah got worse. It was always about something small, me leaving a dish in the sink or being 5 minutes late to pick up Leo. But it was never about the dish. It was about her thinking I wasn't pulling my weight, that I wasn't living up to the standards she had set for our life, or times her times life. Last week we had a really bad one. I don't even remember what started it. It ended with her saying something like, "I don't know what your problem is, but you need to figure it out. I don't have time for this." She went to bed and I just sat in the living room in the dark. I felt completely invisible. Empty. I opened my laptop and just started browsing online. I ended up on Quora on one of those "what's the most messed up thing you've ever thought about" threads. And I just started typing. It was like poison draining out of me. I wrote about the affair. I wrote about how trapped I felt. And then I started building a fantasy. A world where I wasn't the loser. A world where I was the one in control. I wrote out this whole crazy plan. What if I was the one who left? What if I could take Leo, drain our accounts, and leave times her times with nothing? Who would win then? It was a power trip. A stupid late-night scream into the void. To make it feel more real, to make my fantasy of having power feel solid for just 1 second, I used our full names. Sarah's. Leo's. It was a horrible thing to do, but in that moment it made me feel like I had some control over a life that felt like it was spinning away from me. I finally finished writing around 3 a.m. and felt sick to my stomach, but also exhausted. I stumbled into bed and fell asleep. I didn't think about it again. The next morning felt normal. Too normal. I got up, made coffee, got Leo his favorite cereal. Sarah was in the shower getting ready for work. I left my laptop open on the kitchen island, still on that Quora page. It wasn't a trap. It wasn't a plan. It was just a stupid, careless mistake. Proof of just how tired and checked out I was. I was in Leo's room helping him put on his shoes when I heard the water in the shower turn off. A few minutes later, I walked back into the kitchen, ready to start the usual morning rush of getting everyone out the door. But it was quiet. Sarah was standing by the island, her back to me. She was still in her towel, her hair dripping onto the floor. She wasn't getting her coffee. She wasn't checking her phone. She was just standing there perfectly still, looking down at the open laptop. The silence in the kitchen was heavier than anything I'd ever felt. It was a physical thing pressing in on my ears. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the quiet gurgle of the coffee maker. Sounds I'd never noticed before were now deafening in the absence of her voice. "Sarah," I said, and my own voice sounded wrong. She turned around slowly. Her face proud. It wasn't angry. It wasn't sad. It was just blank. Like a switch had been flipped, and all the light had gone out behind her eyes. That was 1,000 times scarier than if she'd been screaming. She looked at me, really looked at me, and I felt like a bug under a microscope. "Who's Chloe?" she asked. Her voice was flat, with no emotion at all. It was the voice she used on conference calls when a deal was going bad. Clinical, detached. My blood ran cold. The stupid, pathetic power fantasy was laid bare. My throat felt tight. "Sarah, listen. It's not what you think. I can explain." She held up a hand to stop me, a gesture so sharp and final it was, like she'd slapped me. "No, you can't," she said, her eyes still locked on mine. "Because I read it. I read all of it." She glanced back at the screen. "You were going to drain the joint account. You were going to try and prove I was an unfit mother. You were going to take Leo." Each sentence was a hammer blow. "It was just a stupid post online," I said, my voice cracking. "I was mad. I was trying to. I don't know vent. It was a fantasy. It wasn't real." "How do you explain that? How do you say I wrote that I wanted to destroy you and take our son because I feel so small and weak? It sounds insane. It sounds like the confession of a monster." She laughed, but it was a dead sound. It had no humor in it. "A fantasy, Mike. You used our son's full name. You wrote down his life as a bargaining chip in your little revenge story. You fantasized about ruining me. About taking my child from me. The only thing you love more than your career, you wrote." She was quoting my own words back to me. "That's not a fantasy. That's a plan." It wasn't a plan. I left the laptop open, for God's sake. If it was a plan, would I have done that? "I don't know what you are anymore," she whispered, and that was what finally broke me. The anger drained away, and all that was left was shame. The man I married wouldn't even be capable of thinking these things, let alone writing them down for the whole world to see. She walked past me, pulling her towel tighter around her, and went into our bedroom. The door clicked shut. I stood there in the middle of the kitchen, feeling the whole world tilt on its axis. Leo called from his room, "Daddy, my shoe is on the wrong foot." I went to him on autopilot, my hands shaking as I fixed his sneakers. He was just a little kid babbling about his daycare friends, completely unaware that his family had just been blown apart in the next room. I hugged him, burying my face in his hair, smelling that little kid smell of shampoo and cereal. It was the most painful moment of my life. When I came out, Sarah was dressed. She had her work clothes on, her face was set like stone. She didn't look at me. "You need to leave," she said, her voice still eerily calm. "Sarah, please." Let's just talk. There's nothing to talk about. I read your confession. I know about the affair. I know what you think of me. And I know what you plan to do to me and our son. Now I want you to pack a bag, and I want you to get out of my house. Asterisk. My time's house. Not our house. Just like that, it was over. I didn't argue anymore. What was the point? I went into the bedroom and threw some clothes into a duffel bag. She stood in the doorway and watched me, her arms crossed. Her expression never changed. She was watching a stranger, a threat. When I was done, I walked to the front door. Can I say goodbye to Leo? She just nodded. I knelt down and gave him another hug. I'll see you soon, buddy. Daddy just has to go away for a little bit. He didn't understand. He just hugged me back and said, "Okay, Daddy, see you later." I walked out the door without looking back. I couldn't bear to see her face again. The last week has been a blur. I'm staying in a cheap motel off the highway. It smells like old smoke and sadness. I tried calling and texting her for the first 2 days. Dozens of messages. I'm sorry. Please, we can fix this. I love you. I miss Leo. I got no response. Then 3 days ago, I got an email. It wasn't from her. It was from a lawyer. A formal notice. She was filing for divorce and requesting an emergency custody order, citing the Quora post as evidence of my intent to cause harm and abduct our child. My sick, stupid fantasy, my scream into the void, was now Exhibit A in the destruction of my life. I haven't even tried to call Chloe. What would I say? The affair feels like it happened to another person in another lifetime. It was an escape, a symptom of the problem, but it wasn't the disease. The disease was in me. This bottomless pit of resentment and insecurity that made me feel like the only way to build myself up was to imagine tearing my wife down. I wrote that post to feel powerful, to feel like the protagonist in my own life, for once. And now I've never been more powerless. I sit in this motel room scrolling through old pictures of Sarah and Leo on my phone. Pictures from when we were a team. When I was a husband and a father, not just support staff. Not just a monster. I wanted to feel like I mattered. In trying to imagine a world where I couldn't lose, I lost everything. She saw me all right. She saw the absolute worst part of me, the part I didn't even know was there until I typed it out. And now that's all I'll ever be to her. I didn't want to destroy her. I just wanted her to see me. Now I have no one to blame but myself that she can't stand the sight of me. I need you to understand my side of this. Everyone is calling me a monster, a kidnapper, but they don't know what I've been through. They haven't lived my life. Before you judge me, you have to know the whole story, not just the lies my sister is telling everyone. My husband and I have been trying for a big family since we got married. I have a beautiful daughter, Amelia, who is 4 now. She is my entire world, my miracle. But she was supposed to be a big sister. Many, many times. I've been pregnant 18 times in my life. 16 of those babies are gone. 14 of them I never even got to hold. They were just gone. a phantom limb I'll feel for the rest of my life. But two of them, two little boys I held my son Michael for 6 hours before his lungs gave out. I held my son David for 2 days. I watched them take their first and last breaths. Do you have any idea what that does to a person? My body is a wasteland of broken promises. My home is so quiet it screams. Every time I look at Amelia playing by herself, my heart physically breaks for the brothers and sisters she'll never know. Then last year, a miracle happened. My little sister Sarah called me. She's only 21, still a kid herself, and has always been loud about how she never wanted children. She's all about her art school and her weird friends. So when she told me she was pregnant, I was shocked. And then she said the words that changed everything. It's twins. It was like the clouds parted and a beam of light hit me. It was so clear. This was it. This was the universe or God or whatever finally making things right. It wasn't an accident. It was a solution. She had two. One for her, one for me. It was perfect. She was never meant to be a mother to two babies, not when I was suffering so much. She was chosen to be the vessel to carry my child to me. My mom saw it right away, too. She called me the second she got off the phone with Sarah and said, "This is our answer. This is how we heal our family." We decided to talk to her together. We took her out to a nice cafe and gently explained the situation. Mom did most of the talking. She told Sarah what a beautiful gift this was, how she could finally do something selfless and meaningful with her life by fixing our broken family. We weren't asking for both, of course. Just one. It was only fair. She could have one and I could have the one I was owed. Sarah just stared at us. I'll never forget the look on her face. It was pure disgust. "Are you out of your minds?" she said. "Hell no, they're my babies." Her words felt like a physical slap. How could she be so selfish, so blind? This wasn't about her. This was about a cosmic wrong being made right. We tried to reason with her, but she just got colder and angrier. She accused us of being insane. I started crying, begging her to understand the years of pain I'd lived through, but she wouldn't listen. I thought she just needed time. I sent her text explaining how much this meant to me, how she was a hero for doing this. She ignored every single one. The last time I saw her before she cut me off, I took her to lunch. She was about 23 weeks along. I tried to talk about our plans, about how we would coordinate things, how my baby would know her cousin. I wanted to talk about names. I had the perfect name picked out, a family name. She just stood up, threw her napkin on the table, and walked out without a word. She left me sitting there alone. After that, she blocked my number. She blocked Mom. It was cruel, but I knew she was just scared. She was young, hormonal, and overwhelmed. She'd come around. I couldn't let her fear stop me from preparing for my daughter. I had to get ready. So I started on the nursery. I painted it a soft yellow and filled it with beautiful furniture. I bought a crib, a changing table, tiny little dresses and blankets. Every time I folded a onesie, I felt a piece of my heart stitch itself back together. This was real. This was happening. I told all our friends and family the wonderful news. I explained that Sarah was being my surrogate, carrying my baby for me as a gift. Everyone was so happy for us. They said it was the most beautiful story of sisterly love they'd ever heard. The support was overwhelming. When the twins were born, they were very early and had to be in the NICU. Sarah didn't tell me, but another family member did. They sent me pictures. 2 tiny little girls hooked up to so many wires. My heart broke for them, but it swelled with love for the one that was mine. I posted a picture of her on my Facebook. I wrote, "Meet Elizabeth May. She came into the world a little early, but she's a fighter, just like her mommy. We can't wait to bring you home. Everyone loved it." Hundreds of likes, comments full of congratulations. I was finally getting my happy ending. For months I updated everyone on Elizabeth's progress in the NICU using the photos I was getting from my aunt. I was building a world for her, a welcome party waiting for her to come home. Now they're finally strong enough to be discharged soon. My whole life is about to begin. I was just sitting in Elizabeth's nursery this morning, rocking in the chair and imagining holding her when my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. My heart stopped when I read the preview on my lock screen. It was from Sarah. The message was blunt. Cruel. Take down every single picture of my daughters right now. Stop telling people Elizabeth is yours. You are sick and you need help. If you ever come near me or my babies, I will call the police. I read it 10 times, the words blurring through my tears. My own sister. How could she be so hateful? After everything I had done to prepare a loving home for her child, times my times, child. This is the thanks I get. She was the one who was sick. Sick with selfishness. My husband, Mark, came into the room. He saw the look on my face, and his own face fell. He's a good man, but he doesn't understand the depths of my pain. He never will. What's wrong? He asked, already looking tired. I showed him the phone. He read it and sighed, rubbing his forehead. Okay, honey. Maybe you should just take the post down for a little while. Just until she calms down. She needs to calm down, I shrieked. She's trying to steal my baby Mark. After I've already announced her to the world, what am I supposed to tell people, that it was all a joke? Before he could answer, there was a loud, angry knock at the front door. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew who it was. I just knew it. Mark opened the door, and there she was. Sarah, my little sister, with a face like thunder. She didn't even look at Mark. Her eyes were locked on me. You have 5 minutes to take down every lie you've posted online, she said, her voice shaking with rage. Then you are going to post an apology explaining that you are mentally unwell and that you lied. I will do no such thing, I said, my voice dangerously calm. Elizabeth is my daughter. You were just the carrier. Sarah let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She pushed past Mark and stormed into my house. Where is it? She demanded, looking around wildly. Where's the crazy shrine you built? And then she saw it. The hallway that leads to the spare rooms. The door to the nursery was slightly ajar. She walked towards it like she was in a trance. I didn't try to stop her. I wanted her to see it. I wanted her to see how much I loved this baby, how real this was. She pushed the door open and just stood there, staring at the soft yellow walls. The white crib with the mobile of little lambs spinning gently above it. The changing table with diapers neatly stacked. The bookshelf filled with stories I couldn't wait to read to her. She turned around slowly, her eyes wide, with a horror that I couldn't understand. "You are out of your mind," she whispered. It was quiet, but it hit me harder than if she'd screamed. "You're a monster." "I'm a mother," I cried, the tears finally breaking free. "I'm the mother who has buried 2 children. I'm the mother who has lost 16 babies. The universe owes me this child. You have 2. You can spare 1. It's not that hard to understand." "They are not objects you can trade," she screamed, her voice finally cracking. "They are human beings, and they are both mine. My body carried them. I went through hell to bring them into this world. They are my daughters Clara and Rose, not Elizabeth." My mom showed up then. I'd called her as soon as Sarah started banging on the door. She rushed in and immediately put her arms around me. "Sarah, stop this," Mom said, glaring at her. "You are ripping this family apart. Look what you're doing to your sister." "Look what times I'm doing," Sarah asked, gesturing around the nursery. "She is delusional, and you are encouraging her. Both of you need professional help." She pulled out her phone. "I'm not kidding. I have a lawyer, and I'm getting a restraining order. You will never see my children. Ever." That's when I snapped. The thought of another child being taken from me, of this one perfect, beautiful gift being snatched away, I couldn't bear it. I lunged for her phone, for anything. I just wanted to make her stop. Mark grabbed me from behind, holding my arms. I was sobbing, screaming at her that she was a thief, a baby snatcher, that she was ruining my life. She just looked at me with cold, dead eyes. There was no love there. No sisterly connection, just disgust. She turned and walked out of the house, out of my life, taking my daughter's future with her. The aftermath was a storm. Sarah did exactly what she said she would. She took screenshots of all my Facebook posts, the pictures of Elizabeth, my heartfelt updates, all the congratulations from our friends and family, and she sent them out in a mass message to everyone we knew. She wrote a long explanation, painting me as a crazy, obsessed kidnapper who was stalking her and her newborns. My phone started blowing up. First came the confused messages. "What is Sarah talking about? Is this a joke?" Then, as the reality of her story set in, the tone changed. The support I had felt for months evaporated in a single afternoon. People who had called me strong and deserving were now calling me unhinged. They accused me of lying, of manipulating them. They took her side. Every single one of them. My beautiful story was torn to shreds. The world I had carefully built for my daughter was a pile of rubble. Mark tried to talk to me, begging me to get help, to see a doctor. He said he was worried I was a danger to myself. I saw it for what it was. He was taking her side too. He didn't believe me either. A week later, the papers came, a temporary restraining order. I was legally forbidden from contacting my sister or coming within 500 feet of her or her children. Her children. Not my times child. A piece of paper trying to erase a mother's bond. Mark took down the nursery while I was out. He said it was for the best. When I came home and saw the empty room, a blank yellow box, I felt that old familiar hollowness. It was the 17th coffin I'd have to carry in my heart. They all think I'm the crazy one. They think this is over. But they don't understand. Sarah wasn't just my sister. She was a vessel. A means to an end. She delivered my baby, and then, in the cruelest twist of all, she stole her. She let me be a mother for a few beautiful months, only to rip it all away. She's the monster, not me. And she can have her lawyers and her restraining orders, but it changes nothing. That little girl is my daughter. She was meant for me. A mother always finds her way back to her child. And I will find my way back to Elizabeth. My husband posts online about me sometimes. He calls me his dead weight. He's not wrong. I'm sitting in this wheelchair right now, listening to him move around the kitchen, and the only thing I can think is that he's right. I am a weight, a burden, a bill that he has to pay for the rest of his life. And the worst part is, I'm the one who rang up the debt. For 25 years, my entire world was him and the kids. I was a wife and a mother. That was it. I packed lunches, I went to soccer games, I hosted holidays. I built our life brick by brick, and I was happy with it. Or I thought I was. When our youngest left for college, the house went quiet. So quiet it hurt my ears. I'd walk from room to room and feel like a ghost. I'd spent so long being mom that I had no idea who I was supposed to be without them. My husband, bless his heart, is a fixer. He saw I was sad, so he tried to fix it. Let's get a puppy, he'd suggest. Let's book a cruise. He was trying to fill my days, but he didn't see the real problem. The problem wasn't my schedule. It was me. I didn't have an identity anymore. I was just the person who used to raise his children. Getting the job at that real estate firm felt like coming up for air after you've been held underwater. Suddenly, I was a person again. I had a desk. I had a name tag. People asked for my opinion. And then there was Mark. He was a coworker, just a guy from the office. But he saw me. Not as a mom, not as someone's wife. He saw a woman. He'd ask about my day and actually listen. He told me I was funny. He told me I was smart. His attention felt like sunshine, and I was so cold and had been in the dark for so long. I know it sounds pathetic. A middle-aged woman getting weak in the knees over a compliment. But it was more than that. It was like a drug. I started dressing up for work, doing my hair again. My husband noticed, but he just laughed. He'd joke about my new college lifestyle when I'd stay out late for drinks with colleagues or text with Mark about a listing. He had no idea what was really happening. He didn't see that I wasn't trying to be young again. I was trying to be a person for the very first time. One night after a few too many glasses of wine, I said something awful to him. I told him he was dimming my light. The hurt on his face still haunts me. It was cruel, but in that moment it was the most honest thing I'd said in years. I felt like a plant that had been kept in a closet, and Mark had opened the door and let the sun in. The affair was the worst mistake of my life, but for a few months it felt beautiful. It was a secret world where I was the main character. It wasn't even really about Mark. It was about the woman I got to be when I was with him. I was exciting. I was desired. I was alive. I was flying, and I didn't care that I was flying straight into the ground. I knew deep down that it was all fake, a fantasy built on lies, and that it would all come crashing down eventually. And it did. It crashed down in the booth of a cheap diner about 40 minutes from our house. We were meeting for lunch, and he leaned over and kissed me. It was just a small kiss, but in that moment it felt like freedom. Then I looked up over his shoulder and saw her. My daughter. My baby girl home from college for the weekend. The look on her face, It wasn't anger. It was disgust. It was like she didn't even recognize me. In her eyes, I saw what I really was. Not some vibrant woman finding herself. I was just a cliché. A selfish, cheating mother who was breaking her own child's heart. The fantasy just popped. Mark disappeared. The diner disappeared. All I could see was my daughter's face. I ended it right there. I walked out of the diner, got in my car, and called my boss to quit my job. I drove home in a daze. When my daughter got back, I begged her. I cried and I pleaded with her not to tell her father. It was the most cowardly thing I have ever done. I took my poison and forced her to drink it to carry that secret for me. My only thought was that I had to protect my husband from this. I convinced myself that if I could just hide it, I could fix it. I would become the perfect wife again. I would atone for what I'd done. For 2 years, that's what I did. I cooked. I cleaned. I threw myself back into the role I'd been so desperate to escape, hoping that if I loved him hard enough, it would somehow cancel out the betrayal. Then came the car accident. It wasn't my fault. A drunk driver ran a red light. I remember the sound of the tires, the shattering of glass, and then nothing. I woke up in a hospital and my husband was holding my hand, crying. The doctor told me the damage to my spine was permanent. I would never walk again. It felt like a sick joke from the universe, a punishment that fit the crime. I had crippled our marriage and now my body was crippled too. My husband became my nurse. He bathed me, he dressed me, he carried me to bed. His care was so tender, so absolute, and every kind touch felt like a hot poker on my skin. The guilt was eating me alive. I felt so worthless, so broken. One night I told him he should find someone else, that he should sleep with other women. He looked at me like I was crazy. He didn't understand. I wasn't trying to push him away. I was trying to tell him I didn't deserve his loyalty. I was damaged goods. A year after that, I found the lump in my throat. When the doctor sat us down and used the word mass, my husband started to cry again. But I didn't. I started to laugh. A wild, hysterical laugh that I couldn't stop. The doctor looked alarmed, but I knew it made perfect sense. All the lies I had swallowed, all the secrets I had kept, choked down for years, they had finally festered. They had turned into a poison growing inside me. This was it. This was the final payment. For years, life went on in our quiet, broken way. Him caring for me, me hating myself, and my daughter watching us both holding the truth like a grenade. I could see the toll it was taking on her. Tonight is our anniversary. He made a special dinner. My daughter came over. She's been drinking more than usual. She's quiet, staring into her wine glass. And then I see it. A look in her eyes I haven't seen since that day in the diner. The look of something shattering. She gets up from the table, her movements unsteady, and walks over to where her father is sitting on the couch. She takes a shaky breath and I see the tears welling up in her eyes. I feel the air leave my own lungs. I know in that one heart-stopping second that my time is up. "Dad," she says, her voice thick and slurry, "I have to tell you something." My husband turns from the TV, a soft, tired smile on his face. The kind of smile he saves for her. "What's up, kiddo? You okay?" She shakes her head, a single tear tracing a path through her makeup. "No." I'm not okay. I haven't been okay for a long time. She points a trembling finger at me. At me, sitting in my stupid chair, unable to move, unable to run. Because of her. The air goes still. My husband's smile fades. He looks from our daughter's face to mine, his expression confused. What's she talking about? He asks me. I can't speak. The lump in my throat, the one the doctors are so worried about, feels like it's a living thing strangling me from the inside. Ask her where she was, my daughter chokes out. Ask her what she was doing when she was working at that real estate place. Before the accident. He turns back to me, his brow furrowed. Honey, what is this? And that's when my daughter finally says the words. The words she has carried for years. The words that have been my death sentence, just waiting to be read aloud. She had an affair, Dad. I saw her. I saw her kissing him. The silence that follows is the loudest thing I have ever heard. It's a physical thing pressing in on my eardrums. My husband just stares at me. There's no anger yet, just a blank, uncomprehending look. He's trying to process it, trying to fit this new piece of information into the puzzle of our life, and it just won't fit. The picture he's known for 30 years is being ripped apart in front of him. Is she telling the truth? He asks. His voice is quiet, dangerously quiet. All I can do is nod. A tiny, pathetic movement of my head. But it's enough. I watch the understanding dawn on his face, and it's like watching a man die. The confusion drains away, replaced by a wave of pure, agonizing pain. He actually stumbles back a step like he's been physically struck. His eyes, the kind brown eyes I fell in love with, turn to stone. He looks at me, really looks at me for the first time in years. Not as his wife, not as his patient. He looks at me like I'm a stranger. A monster. All this time he whispers. The words are barely audible. He looks from my face down to my useless legs, then back up again. His face twists into something I've never seen before. It's not sadness. It's disgust. Pure, undiluted disgust. All this time, I've been bathing you, feeding you, carrying you, for what? He takes a step closer, his voice rising. I gave up everything for you after that accident. I felt sorry for you, and you let me. He's shouting now, and our daughter is openly sobbing in the corner. You let me sacrifice my life to take care of a liar. A cheat. He laughs, a horrible broken sound. You told me to sleep with other women. Was that your guilty conscience? Trying to even the score? I try to say his name, but my voice is a croak. He crouches down so his face is level with mine. I can smell the wine from dinner on his breath. You are used, he hisses, his face inches from mine. A broken used thing. And I'm stuck with you. He stands up and looks down at me, at my body trapped in this chair. You're nothing but dead weight. My dead weight. And I know he's right. That's the most terrible part. He's saying everything that I've been thinking about myself for years. I deserved it. I deserved every single word. He didn't leave. How could he? I can't even get to the bathroom by myself. He is my jailer, and I am his prisoner. The house that was once my refuge is now our shared cell. The weeks that followed were a special kind of hell. The silence came back, but this time it wasn't empty. It was full of hate. He still takes care of me. He's a good man after all. It's his duty. But the tenderness is gone. When he lifts me from the bed to the chair, his hands are rough. He doesn't look at me. His touch is clinical, the way a nurse would handle a patient they dislike. He prepares my meals, puts them on a tray in front of me, and walks away. We live in the same house, but we haven't had a real conversation since that night. The only sounds are the television and the whir of my wheelchair. Sometimes late at night I hear him crying in his room. He moved into the guest room down the hall. The sound of his grief is a knife in my heart. A constant reminder that I didn't just break his trust. I broke times him, asterisk. I murdered the happy, simple man he used to be, and I replaced him with this hollowed-out ghost who shares my address. My daughter tries to visit, but it's too hard. She looks at us at this quiet war zone, and the guilt overwhelms her. She feels responsible for the explosion, even though I'm the one who built the bomb. I want to tell her it's not her fault that the truth had to come out, but the words get stuck in my throat right there next to the mass. And the mass is still there. Growing. I go to my appointments. He takes me, of course. He sits in the waiting room, scrolling through his phone while I get the bad news. The doctors use words like aggressive and options. I listen and I feel nothing. It feels like justice. The lie I kept in my throat for so long is now eating me alive. There's a poetry to it, I suppose. He still posts about me online. That's how this all started, isn't it? With me telling you what he says. He talks to strangers on the internet about the burden of being a caretaker about his deadweight wife. I know he does it because he has no one else to talk to. I took that from him too. I isolated him with my betrayal. His online ranting is the only release he has. I don't know how this ends. Maybe the cancer will get me. Maybe one day he'll just pack a bag and leave, consequences be damned. Or maybe this is it. Maybe we just go on like this for another 20 years, trapped in this quiet, hateful house until one of us dies. I wanted to find myself. I wanted to feel like a person, not just a role. It was a selfish, desperate search, and I left a trail of wreckage so wide I can't even see the other side. I look at this man, the man I still love, with every broken piece of my being, and I see the full extent of the damage. I didn't just lose myself in my marriage. I incinerated myself, and I took the best person I've ever known down with me. He was the one who gave my life meaning, and I repaid him by turning his life into a tragedy. He calls me his dead weight. He's right. But the truth is, we're both sinking, and I'm the one who chained us together. I'm sure my ex-husband has told you all about me. I'm the monster, the cheating wife who blew up our perfect life for no reason. He probably told you how he gave me everything, how he worked so hard to build us a home, and how I threw it all away for a cheap thrill. He's good at telling that story. He's had a lot of practice. But he always leaves out the part where I disappeared long before I ever got in that car. We met when I was 19. He was almost 30, a man with a 5-year plan and a retirement portfolio. I was a kid working at a coffee shop with no plan other than what I was doing that weekend. He swept me off my feet. He was so sure about everything, and I thought that meant he was sure about me. I was wrong. He was sure about his plan, and I was just a piece he'd slotted into it. I wasn't a partner. I was the wife accessory. He bought a beautiful house in a nice neighborhood. He called it our house, but it was his. His office was the center of it. His rules were the law. I tried to make it a home. I'd pick out new curtains and he'd say they were fine without looking up from his laptop. I'd cook his favorite dinner and he'd eat while answering work emails. I was just background noise. My job was to keep the house running so he could focus on his important life as the breadwinner. He didn't see me. He saw a dependent. He'd hand me his credit card and tell me to buy something nice, like I was a child he needed to placate with a toy. The loneliness was a physical weight. I felt like I was suffocating in silence. For months I begged him to go to marriage counseling. I tried to tell him how I felt invisible, lost, more like his daughter than his wife. He'd just pat my hand and say, "We don't need to pay someone to listen to our problems. We're fine. You're just stressed." He wasn't listening. He was dismissing me. My only escape was my co-ed soccer team. He hated it. He thought I just went to get drunk with a bunch of guys. He wasn't entirely wrong about the drinking. A few beers helped me forget that I was going home to a man who shared a bed with me but not a life. But it wasn't about the beer. It was about feeling like a person. On the field, I was part of a team. After the game at the bar, people talked times me. My teammate Buddy would ask how my day was and actually listen to the answer. They'd laugh at my dumb jokes. For 2 hours on a Wednesday night, I wasn't just my husband's wife. I was just me. And it felt incredible. The night it all fell apart was just another Wednesday. We had a game, and afterward the team was going to a party at someone's house. I was excited. It was something to look forward to. When I told my husband, his face went cold. He told me I couldn't go. "Not, I wish you wouldn't, but..." "You're not going." He said he wanted to spend the evening with me, that he'd had a long week. It sounded sweet on the surface, but the tone wasn't one of a partner asking for my time. It was a father grounding his kid. Something inside me just broke. All the resentment, all the times I'd felt unheard and controlled, it all just boiled over. So when Buddy dropped me off after the game and asked if I was sure I didn't want to go to the party, I just got back in his car. It wasn't about Buddy. It wasn't even about the party. It was a desperate, stupid, self-destructive way of screaming, "You don't own me!" I drank way too much, way too fast. I was chasing a feeling. I wanted to feel wanted. I wanted to feel time seen asterisk. And I was. The attention was like a drug. People were looking at me, laughing, with me touching my arm when I spoke. For a few hours I was the main character. It was messy and ugly. I had sex with Buddy. I slept with another guy on the team too. It was a blur of terrible decisions, one crashing into the next. It was a horrible way to feel alive, but it was the only way I could remember how. The next morning, the shame hit me like a physical blow. I crept downstairs, my head pounding, my stomach churning with guilt and cheap beer. He was already up, sitting at the kitchen table with a coffee, staring at the wall. His eyes were like ice. He didn't yell. He just said, "Tell me what happened last night." How could I? How could I explain that I set our whole life on fire just because I felt small? I couldn't form the words. So I lied. I told him I went to the party, had too much to drink, and crashed on a couch. A sanitized, pathetic half-truth. He just stared at me for a long moment. Then he pushed his iPad across the table. Try again. My messages were open, my location history. Photos from the night before that someone had texted me. He had seen everything. My stomach dropped out. It wasn't just the cheating. It was the fact that he'd been watching me. The first words out of my mouth weren't, "I'm sorry." They were a pathetic, terrified whisper, "Are you leaving me?" My whole identity was so wrapped up in him that my first instinct was fear of being abandoned, not remorse for what I'd done. That's when I broke down completely. I told him everything, every single ugly detail. I cried until I couldn't breathe. I promised I'd do anything. I'd go to AA. I'd quit the team. I immediately found a marriage counselor, the one I'd been begging him to see for a year, and booked an appointment. I was ready to crawl through glass to fix what I had broken. We started going to therapy. I was trying, I really was. But he was a ghost. He was there, but he was gone. He'd sit next to me on the couch, but he wouldn't touch me. He slept in the guest room. The silence in the house was worse than it had ever been. I felt like I was poison. The only person who would even talk to me like I was still human was Buddy. He'd text to check on me. We'd meet for coffee. It was wrong, and I knew it was wrong, but he was a lifeline in an ocean of loneliness. It was a sick, pathetic comfort reaching for the person who helped me ruin everything, but I felt so completely alone. Then one night, after a terrible silent dinner, my husband came to me. He said he'd been thinking. He said maybe the reason we couldn't move forward was because there was too much baggage. He had a plan. He said we should get a divorce, a clean, simple, uncontested one, so we could wipe the slate clean. He painted this picture of us starting over, dating each other again, rebuilding from scratch without the weight of the past. He said it was the only way to save us. Looking at him, seeing a flicker of hope in his eyes, for the first time in weeks I actually believed him. I thought this was our chance. I told him I'd do whatever it took. He was so convincing. He laid out this whole roadmap for our healing, and I clung to it like a life raft. I was so desperate to believe that the man I married was still in there somewhere, buried under all the hurt. So I played my part. I became the most cooperative future ex-wife you've ever seen. I helped him get the paperwork together. When he said it would be faster and cheaper if we didn't use lawyers, I agreed without a second thought. Why would we need them? We were on the same team after all. I packed up my clothes and personal things, moving them into a storage unit he helped me rent. He told me it was a temporary step, a way to make the separation feel real, so our reunion would be even sweeter. Each box I taped up felt like a step toward fixing us. I spent days methodically taking myself out of the house we were supposed to share, smiling through my tears because I thought I was earning my way back to him. I was a ghost in my own home, tidying up the evidence of my existence, all while he watched with what I thought was sadness, but now I know was just patience. The day we signed the papers, he held my hand. He told me he was proud of me, that this was the hardest part, and that soon we could start building us again. I signed on every dotted line he pointed to. I waived my right to spousal support because he said it would just complicate things, and we didn't need that. We needed a clean break to get our clean start. I believed every single word. I was so blinded by the hope he was selling me that I couldn't see the truth right in front of my face. The divorce was finalized in a few weeks. It was all so clean, so efficient. I remember calling him that night, my voice shaking with a mix of fear and excitement. "So, it's done," I said. "When do we start over? When is our first date?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. It was a different kind of silence than the one I had grown used to. This one was heavy final. "We're not," he said. His voice was flat, empty of all the warmth he'd been faking for the past month. I couldn't process it. What are you talking about?" This was the plan. "Your plan." "No," he said, and I could almost hear the smirk in his voice. "This was always the plan. My plan." And then he dropped the other shoe. "Did you really think I didn't know you were still seeing Buddy? That you were still texting him, meeting him for coffee?" My blood ran cold. He sent me a screenshot. A text from me to Buddy from just the week before asking if he wanted to meet up. He had more. He'd been tracking me the whole time, gathering a second round of evidence. All that time I thought I was working to fix our marriage, he was just building a better case against me. He spelled it out for me slowly like he was talking to a child. The "let's start over" story was a lie. He knew that if he just divorced me outright, it could get messy. I might fight for the house for alimony. I was the cheated-on, neglected wife before I became the cheating wife. A good lawyer might have been able to argue that. But by getting me to continue my affair with Buddy, times after times I'd been caught while we were supposedly reconciling, he had what he needed. He had proof that I was unremorseful. "I needed you to be cooperative," he explained, his voice devoid of any emotion. "I needed you to sign the papers without a fight. And you did. You signed away everything. If you try to fight this now, I'll bring all of this to a judge. They won't see a heartbroken wife who made a mistake. They'll see a serial cheater who was sleeping with her affair partner while in marriage counseling. You won't get a dime." The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I hadn't just been divorced. I had been dismantled. He hadn't been a heartbroken husband. He had been a strategist. He used my hope, my guilt, and my desperation against me. Every tear he shed, every promise he made was a calculated move in his game. I was a problem to be managed, and he had managed it perfectly, ensuring he got a clean, cheap exit with no obligations. I was just a pawn he sacrificed to win. The weeks after that phone call are a blur. I was left with a car, a storage unit full of stuff, and an empty bank account. He had already removed me from everything. I had nothing. The shame was suffocating. It wasn't just about the cheating anymore. It was about being a fool. He had played me so completely, and I had let him because I was so desperate to be forgiven. Buddy was long gone, of course. He was a symptom of a sickness, not a cure, and once the marriage was officially dead, there was no reason for him to stick around. I was truly alone for the first time in my life. I got a cheap apartment and a waitressing job. Some nights I would just sit on the floor and cry, not for the man I lost, but for the girl who was so lost she let a man define her entire existence. A few months later, just for something to do, I started talking to people online. Not dating, just talking. I met a man from Tennessee. He was kind. He was a truck driver, and he would call me from the road. He didn't have a 5-year plan or a stock portfolio. He just had stories about the road and a laugh that made me feel warm. He asked me questions about my day and actually listened to the answers. He didn't see me as a project or a broken thing to be fixed. He just saw me. After a few months, he asked me to come visit him. I packed a single suitcase and drove the 9 hours to his small town in Tennessee. I never left. We got married 6 months later at the courthouse. It wasn't a big production. It was just us. It was real. I'm pregnant now. And when I feel the baby kick, I'm not scared. For the first time, I feel like I'm building a life, not just living in someone else's. My ex-husband took my house, my money, and my dignity. He thinks he won. But he left me with one thing myself. And I'm finally learning who that is. He can tell his story and paint me as the villain. But what he did, the cold and calculated way he manipulated my heart to get what he wanted, that was a different kind of evil. I set our life on fire in a moment of desperate, drunken madness. He quietly and patiently burned mine to the ground so he could walk away without any smoke on his clothes. My husband, let's call him John, is a good man. I need to start there because I know how this is all going to sound. He's a good father to our son, he works hard, and he's never raised his voice to me. Our life is good. We have a nice little house, a decent car, and we pay our bills on time. By any normal standard, I have nothing to complain about. But good has slowly over 7 years turned into a different word. Predictable. I was 20 when we got married and a mom by 22. Now I'm 27 and I feel like I'm living someone else's life, or at least a version of my own that's 30 years in the future. My world is a rotation of work schedules, daycare, drop-offs, mortgage payments, and remembering to buy the right kind of organic yogurt for our son. I love my family more than anything, but sometimes I look in the mirror and I don't know the person looking back. Who is she when she's not being mom or wife? I couldn't remember. Then Dale started at my office. It wasn't a lightning bolt or anything. He's just different. He's funny and energetic, and when he talks to me, he actually looks at me. He asks about what music I liked in high school, or what I thought of a new movie. He sees me times a person, not just the quiet woman in accounting who has a picture of her kid on her desk. For the first time in years, I felt a little flicker of something that was just for me. It was a nice feeling. So when the company's annual winter party came up, I was actually excited to go. My plan was simple: get a little dressed up, meet my best friend Emma, have a few drinks, and just feel like a normal 7-year-old for one night. It wasn't about running away from John or my son. It was about running toward the person I used to be. John and I have always been good about that stuff, giving each other space. He had his poker nights, I had my nights out with Emma. It was normal. The party started out fine, but my usual work friends were talking about their kids' potty training and new minivans. I felt that familiar sense of suffocation. Then Emma and I literally ran into Dale and a couple of his friends near the bar. The energy just completely changed. He bought us a round of drinks, and suddenly we were laughing about stupid stuff, not mortgage rates. When our work party started winding down, Dale suggested we all go to another bar down the street, a place with louder music and a younger crowd. It was spontaneous and fun, and I said yes without thinking. That second bar is a bit of a blur of laughter and bad dancing. At some point, the four of us were sitting in a booth, all of us pretty drunk, and Emma made a ridiculous bet. I don't even remember how it started, but she bet me that we could get Dale and his friend to kiss. It was such a stupid, silly idea. The prize, if we succeeded, they would have to buy us drinks all night. The price, if we failed, we had to kiss. Of course, they refused. So in a moment of drunken genius, I leaned over and gave Emma a quick kiss on the lips. It lasted 2 seconds. It was a dumb party trick, a joke between best friends. Everyone laughed, and that was it. For the rest of the night, Dale was a little more touchy. A hand on my arm when he was telling a story, standing a bit too close when we were at the bar. I figured it was just the alcohol and the loud music. When it started to feel like a little too much, I grabbed Emma and said it was time to go. We said our goodbyes, went back to her place to sober up with some greasy food, and then I took a cab home. I woke up the next day feeling that familiar mix of a slight hangover and the buzz from a genuinely fun night. I hadn't felt that carefree in forever. Later that afternoon, a message from Dale popped up on my Facebook. Last night was so much fun, I smiled. It was nice to be reminded of it. I messaged him back and we fell into an easy, flirty conversation. It was an ego boost, plain and simple. I felt seen, I felt fun, I felt interesting. When John asked me how my night was, I just said, "It was fun, Emma, and I had a few too many drinks." He didn't need to know all the silly, meaningless details. Later I was texting with Emma, and we were making some pretty crude jokes about Dale and this girl he apparently went home with after we left. Reading them back, they just sounded mean and gossipy. It felt gross, like it tainted the fun of the night. It was easier to just delete them, so I did. I erased about a dozen messages from our chat. It felt like cleaning up a mess. The conversation with Dale continued on and off. We were talking about work, and then it shifted to fitness and New Year's resolutions. He was talking about getting back to the gym, and I said I was trying to do the same. He asked what my goal was, and without really thinking, I dug up an old photo of myself on my phone from before I had my son. I was about 20 pounds lighter, smiling on a beach. I sent it to him with a caption, "Trying to get back to this." In my mind, it was just motivation. It was all just harmless, exhilarating fun. A secret little pocket of excitement in my otherwise very scheduled life. A few days went by. Everything was normal. Then one evening, John came home from work, and while he was taking off his shoes, he said, "So, a friend of mine said he saw you out at the Raven on Saturday." My blood ran cold. The Raven was the second bar, the one I hadn't mentioned. But more than that, I knew his friends. None of them would ever go there. It was a lie. A test. My voice was shaky when I answered, "Oh yeah, who?" He just shrugged and changed the subject, but the air in the room felt thick and heavy. A knot of dread started to form in my stomach, and it stayed there for 2 days. Then this morning he asked for our Verizon account password. He was standing in the kitchen looking at his phone, and his voice was so casual it was creepy. "Hey, can you remind me of the Verizon login? I want to check if we can get a better deal on our data plan." He's never in 7 years cared about our data plan. That's always been my thing. The excuse felt so thin, so perfectly rehearsed. My heart started pounding in my chest. Was he? No. He wouldn't. He trusts me. We trust each other. But the look on his face wasn't curious. It was determined. And as I slowly typed the password into his phone, I had the sickening feeling that he wasn't looking for a new data plan. He was looking for me. I watched him walk out of the kitchen with his phone, my password now in his possession. The silence he left behind was louder than any argument we'd ever had. I tried to go about my evening. I gave our son a bath, read him a story, and tucked him into bed, all on autopilot. My hands were steady, but my insides were shaking. Every creak of the floorboards from the living room where John was sitting made me jump. I felt like a criminal waiting for the verdict. The waiting was the worst part. He didn't say a word for hours. Finally, after I couldn't stand the tension anymore, I went downstairs to get a glass of water. Our little home office, which is really just a corner of the living room, was dark except for the glow of the family tablet screen. He must have left it on. As I walked past, my own face looked back at me from the screen. It was my Facebook Messenger profile. Open. My entire conversation with Dale was just there. Every stupid exclamation point, every flirty joke, every little ego-stroking message. My stomach dropped. I scrolled. He hadn't just seen one message, he had read everything. I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't an accident, a glance over my shoulder. This was an investigation. I grabbed my own phone from the counter, my fingers trembling as I opened it. It felt tainted, like a stranger had been pawing through my diary. I didn't know what to do, so I just stood there in the dark, my heart pounding, waiting for him to find me. He came into the room a few minutes later and flipped on the light. He didn't look angry. He looked tired and sad, and that was so much worse. He was holding a piece of paper. So he started, his voice flat. "Tell me about Dale." I couldn't speak. I just gestured helplessly at the tablet screen. "You saw..." "I saw some of it," he said, his eyes cold. Then I logged into the Verizon account. "You deleted 12 text messages between you and Emma from Saturday night. 12 of them. Right after you were messaging him. What was in those texts you didn't want me to see?" He knew. He had gone into the online portal. He had looked at the text logs. He had seen the timestamps, the sheer number of messages sent and received, and he had cross-referenced them with my phone. He wasn't just my husband anymore. He was my warden, my interrogator. "They were stupid jokes, John," I stammered. "Emma and I were making fun of him and some girl he went home with. It was crude and mean, and I was embarrassed. That's all." He just stared at me, his face unreadable. "And the picture, the one of you in a bikini from 5 years ago, was that just an embarrassing joke, too? We were talking about fitness goals. It was motivation. It wasn't like that." "What was it like then?" he shot back, his voice finally cracking with anger. "What was it like at the Raven?" "My friend didn't see you there. The location data on your phone told me you were there." "What was it like when you kissed Emma right in front of him? Was that for her, or was that a little show for him?" Every word was an accusation, a piece of his evidence portfolio. He had twisted everything. A drunken, silly night out was a secret rendezvous. A dumb kiss between best friends was a performance for another man's benefit. A friendly, flirty chat was an emotional affair. He saw a premeditated plot where there was only a series of impulsive, reckless, and yes, stupid choices. "You've been watching me," I whispered, the reality of it hitting me like a punch to the gut. "You lied to me. You went through my private messages, my phone logs. You've been spying on me." "I had to," he yelled, finally losing his composure. "You were lying to me, hiding things. What was I supposed to do?" "You were supposed to talk to me," I screamed back, tears streaming down my face now. "You were supposed to be my husband, not my detective. You could have asked me about the second bar. You could have told me you felt insecure. But you didn't. You chose to sneak around and treat me like a criminal." I owned my part. I told him he was right that it looked bad. I had been reckless and selfish, chasing a feeling and not thinking about how it would affect him. I apologized for that sincerely. But he wouldn't hear it. He just stood there armed with his neatly compiled list of my betrayals, feeling completely and totally justified in what he did. He saw my behavior as the crime and his invasion of my privacy as the necessary police work. He couldn't see that he had committed a crime of his own. He had violated the single most important thing in our marriage, the assumption of trust. The fight went on for what felt like hours, a circular nightmare of accusations and justifications. I felt so exposed, so sickened by the idea of him scrolling through my private thoughts that I grabbed my phone and deleted the Messenger app right in front of him. It wasn't to hide anything more. It was a desperate attempt to have one single corner of my own mind back. "Go on, keep watching," I said, my voice dripping with a bitterness I'd never felt before. "You want the truth? Call Emma. Call Dale. Ask them, please. Do it. See how paranoid this has made you." I was daring him, pleading with him to see that the monster he was chasing was mostly in his own head. He just shook his head. "I don't need to. I know what I saw." Eventually, we just ran out of things to say. He stood in the kitchen and said, "I'm dropping it. We'll just drop it." But nothing was dropped. The words are still hanging in the air between us, heavy and poisonous. We sleep in the same bed, but there's a canyon between us. He looks at me and I know he's thinking he caught me just in time, that he stopped something terrible before it could happen. He thinks he's the hero who saved our marriage. He's wrong. The truth is, he showed me that in our good, predictable life, I am not his partner. I am a subject to be monitored, a risk to be managed. The trust isn't just broken, it's been pulverized. And maybe he's right. Maybe I was on a slippery slope and my stupid, selfish search for a spark could have led to something worse. I don't know if he caught me starting something. But what I know for sure is that he just ended something. I don't know why I'm writing this. Maybe I just need to get it out to put my side of the story somewhere, because right now I'm the monster. I'm the toxic father, the manipulative old man who drove his own daughter away. But that's not the truth. The truth is, I did everything for my family, and I lost my youngest daughter because I refused to let a boy with a chip on his shoulder tear it apart. I have 4 kids. 4 beautiful children who are my entire world. I've worked the same job for 30 years, not because I love it, but because it put food on the table and paid for dance lessons and college degrees. My whole life has been built on one simple idea: family is everything. We're a team. We have traditions, Sunday dinners, holidays at our house, things that keep us connected. They're not rules written in stone. They're the glue that holds us together. When my 2 older daughters got married, their husbands understood this. Before they proposed, each of them came to my house, sat in my living room, and asked for my blessing. They were nervous, and I respected that. It's not about me giving away my daughter like she's property. My girls are smart, strong women who make their own choices. The gesture is about respect. It's a man saying, "I want to join your family, and I honor the role you've had in raising the woman I love." It's how you show you understand that you're not just getting a wife. You're becoming part of something bigger. Both times I shook their hands, called them my sons, and we celebrated. That's how it's supposed to work. Then my youngest, my baby girl, started dating her boyfriend. I'll call him Kevin. And honestly, for the first couple of years, I really liked Kevin. He was smart, had a good job, and seemed to make my daughter incredibly happy. I welcomed him with open arms. He was at every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every birthday party. He ate at my table, laughed at my stupid jokes, and I treated him like he was already one of my own. I thought he saw how we were. I thought he got it. I found out I was wrong with a single phone call. It was my daughter screaming with joy. "Dad, we're engaged." For a second, my heart soared. And then it crashed. I was happy for her, of course I was. But as she went on about the ring and how he proposed, a cold, heavy feeling settled in my gut. He hadn't called me. He hadn't sent a text. Nothing. After years of being welcomed into our home, he couldn't make a 5-minute phone call to show a little respect for me or our family's traditions. It felt like a deliberate insult. A slap in the face. I tried to handle it calmly. I explained to my daughter why I was hurt. It wasn't about control, it was about respect. She didn't get it. She said it was old-fashioned. I knew it wasn't her. It was him in her ear, telling her I was some kind of dinosaur. So I tried to make it easy. I tried to build a bridge. I told her, "Listen, I have an idea. Let's just fix this. I'll pay for a big fancy dinner for all of us. We'll go to that steakhouse he loves. I'll buy the expensive wine. We'll celebrate the engagement, and at some point he can just say a few words and we'll call it a day. We can put it behind us and start fresh." It was a peace offering. I was trying to give him an easy way to make things right so we could all move forward as a united family. I thought it was a perfect solution, but he refused. My daughter called me back and she was crying. She said Kevin told her my offer was offensive. He said he'd read an article about a woman being stoned to death in Pakistan for disobeying her father, and that my request was basically the same thing. He compared a simple family tradition, a sign of respect, to an honor killing. That's when I knew. This wasn't about old-fashioned versus modern. This was about him. He was arrogant, and he was intentionally painting me as a villain to isolate my daughter. He wanted her all to himself without the family she grew up with. He was drawing a line and forcing her to choose a side. That was a choice I couldn't let him make for our family. If he was going to disrespect us so profoundly, we couldn't just smile and pretend it was okay. I told my wife, my other kids, and my extended family what happened. I told them that we couldn't in good conscience celebrate a marriage that began with such a blatant act of disrespect to our entire family. It was one of the hardest decisions of my life, but I felt I had to protect our family's dignity. If we let this go, what would be next? So we didn't go to the wedding. My heart was broken. My wife cried for a week straight. My oldest daughter, Sarah, who also didn't attend, tried to reason with her sister, but it was no use. Only one of my daughters, my middle child, caved and went. The rest of the family stood with us. We spent that Saturday in silence, thinking about the empty chair at what should have been a happy family event. After the wedding, things got colder. My wife, bless her heart, kept trying. She'd send my daughter cards on holidays or birthdays, just letting her know about a family barbecue or a christening. Just little notes to say, "We love you, we miss you, you still belong here." but my daughter saw it as poison. She accused us of taunting her, of rubbing in the fact that she wasn't invited. We weren't. We were just trying to keep the door open, hoping she'd walk through it. Then about a year later, my sister called me. She'd seen it on social media. My daughter was pregnant. My first grandchild. A wave of pure, uncut hope washed over me. This was it. This was the miracle we needed. A baby changes everything. A baby can heal any wound, bridge any gap. This child would be the tie that brought us all back together. I could feel it in my bones. I was ready to forget everything. The disrespect, the wedding, the nasty words, none of it mattered anymore. All I wanted was to meet my grandchild and have my daughter back in my life. My hands were shaking as I dialed her number for the first time in almost 2 years. I had it all planned out in my head. I would congratulate her. I would tell her I loved her. I would ask if we could name the baby after my mother, if it's a girl, a beautiful name to connect her to her roots. I'd suggest a baptism, a wonderful celebration where the whole family could finally be in the same room celebrating this new life. I just knew she'd say yes. How could she not? This was about a baby, about family. As the phone rang, I held my breath, praying this was the moment our nightmare would end. After a few rings, she picked up. "Hello," she said, her voice cautious and unfamiliar. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Honey, it's Dad. Your aunt told me the news. A baby. That's wonderful. Congratulations, really. I'm so happy for you." There was a long pause on the other end, so quiet I thought she might have hung up. "Thanks," she finally said. The word was flat. Empty. This was my chance. I pushed forward the hope, making my words rush together. "I was thinking, sweetheart. This is a chance for a fresh start for all of us. I was hoping. If it's a girl, maybe you would consider naming her after your grandmother. My mom, it would mean the world to me to connect her to our family right from the start." I paused, waiting for the warmth I was so sure would come. And we could plan a beautiful baptism. The whole family, all of us together, again celebrating this new life. We can put everything behind us. The silence that followed was different. It was cold, hard. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. "No. What do you mean, no?" "I mean no," she said, her voice changing. It wasn't my daughter's voice anymore. It was sharper, full of an anger I hadn't heard since she was a teenager. "No, we will not be naming our daughter after your mother. No, we will not be having a baptism. And no, you will not be a part of this baby's life." "What are you talking about?" I stammered, my vision starting to swim. "This is my grandchild." "You made your choice when you refused to come to my wedding," she spat. "You tried to control me then, and you're trying to control me now with this baby. You're toxic. You're a manipulator, and I will not have that around my child. You are not to contact me again. You are not invited into my daughter's life. Not now, not ever. Goodbye." And then the click. I stood there in the kitchen, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My wife came in and saw my face, and she knew. She took the phone from my hand and just held me while I fell apart. He had done it. He had finally and completely severed her from us. He had won. A week later, Kevin started calling. My number, my wife's number. He'd leave calm, polite voicemails. I really think we should all talk. I want to find a way to move forward for the sake of the baby. It was sick. It was a victory lap. He wasn't trying to make peace. He was calling to remind me that he was in charge. He held all the cards, my daughter, my grandchild, and he wanted me to know it. After the third call, I finally picked up. "What do you want, Kevin?" I asked, my voice low. "I just want what's best for everyone," he said, that smooth, reasonable tone that I now knew was completely fake. "I want my child to know her grandparents." The rage that had been simmering inside me for 2 years boiled over. "Don't you dare," I snarled. "Don't you dare pretend you're the good guy here. You did this. You systematically poisoned my daughter against her own family because your ego couldn't handle showing a little respect. You got what you wanted. You have her all to yourself. So please enjoy your prize and have the decency to leave us alone to grieve." I hung up before he could respond. He stopped calling after that. The next few months were the darkest of my life. The silence from my daughter was absolute. My wife walked around like a ghost in our own home. Some nights she'd turn to me in bed and whisper, "Did we do the right thing? Maybe we should have just gone." I didn't have an answer for her. Standing on principle felt hollow when my house was so quiet. Our other kids tried their best. They'd call, they'd visit, but there was always this giant hole where their sister used to be. Holidays were a joke. We'd sit around the big dining room table and everyone would stare at her empty chair. We found out about the birth from a text message sent by my middle daughter, the one who went to the wedding. She's the only one who still has any contact. The message just said times. She had the baby. A girl. "Everyone is healthy. Asterisk, that was it." No name, no weight, no picture. Just a sterile announcement like a news report. A few days later, my sister found a picture online. My daughter had posted it. She was in a hospital bed looking exhausted but glowing, holding this tiny, perfect little baby wrapped in a pink blanket. Kevin had his arm around her, smiling at the camera with a look of pure triumph. And I saw in his eyes the same arrogance from the day he refused my peace offering. He was smiling because he knew he had it all. I look at that picture every day. I saved it to my phone. My granddaughter has my daughter's nose and her dark hair. I wonder what her laugh sounds like. I wonder if she'll ever know she has a grandfather who thinks about her from the moment he wakes up to the moment he falls asleep. People will say I'm stubborn. They'll say I should have just swallowed my pride and gone to the wedding. Maybe they're right. But what they don't understand is that it was never about my pride. It was about seeing a man deliberately isolate the woman I love, my daughter, and knowing that if I didn't stand up for our family at that first moment of disrespect, I would lose her piece by piece anyway. It was a test, and he made sure we failed. My actions had the exact opposite effect of what I wanted. I acted to keep my family whole, and my choices are the reason it's broken. I live with that irony every single day. I see my wife's sadness, I feel the distance between my other kids, and I know I am the one who drew the line in the sand. But I drew it to protect us. He just convinced my daughter to cross it. I don't know if I'll ever hold my grandchild. I don't know if my daughter will ever speak to me again. I lost everything, all because I believed that family and the respect that holds it together was something worth fighting for. I'm the girl who cheated. I know that's how he tells the story, and he's not wrong. It's the one fact that burns everything else to the ground. But it's not the whole story. It's just the ending he saw. The story I lived was something different. Before I met him, my life was like one of those perfect houses in a magazine. Everything was expensive, clean, and completely empty. There was no life in it. The people, the men I dated, they were all the same. They looked at me and saw my father's last name, the balance in my trust fund. They'd talk about mergers and acquisitions over dinner while I just pushed food around my plate, feeling invisible. My whole world was about appearances. Silent dinners where the clinking of silverware was the loudest sound. Grand gestures that meant nothing because they were just transactions. Love was something you bought, you proved you won. Then I met him. He worked at a small graphic design company my dad's firm hired for a tiny, unimportant project. He was wearing a faded band t-shirt and had paint under his fingernails. He didn't look at my purse to see if it was designer. He looked at my face when I talked. He laughed at my stupid jokes. He asked me about my dreams, not my portfolio. For the first time, someone actually saw times me times Vanessa, not the walking bank account. Our worlds should have never mixed. His life was loud and messy and real. He had roommates and late rent payments and friends who would drop everything to help you move a couch. My life was scheduled, sterile, and lonely. When I introduced him to my parents, my father shook his hand and then immediately asked him about his 5-year plan. He just smiled and said, "To be happy." My father didn't get it. I did. It was everything I ever wanted. For 5 years, we built a life together. We moved into a small apartment that he filled with warmth and laughter. Our friends merged his rowdy, loyal group and my polished, polite ones. It felt like a miracle. I was living in this beautiful dream, a normal life. And it terrified me every single day. I felt like an imposter, a spoiled girl playing dress-up. I kept waiting for him to wake up and realize I wasn't good enough. That I was just pretending to be this down-to-earth person when deep down I was one of them, one of the hollow people I ran away from. The better things got, the louder the voice in my head became. He'd look at me with so much love, so much trust, and the voice would whisper times, "You're going to break it. You don't deserve this. You're going to ruin him." Asterisk. Loving him felt like a 5-year-long panic attack. I was so afraid of losing the one real thing in my life that my fear started to poison it. I'd pick fights over nothing just to see if he'd leave. He never did. He was patient and kind, which only made me feel worse. It made me feel like an even bigger fraud. The night it happened is a sick blur. I was out with some of my old friends from college. They were all talking about their lives, which sounded like checklists. Engagement, wedding house, in the suburbs, kids. It was the exact life I'd run from, but they made it sound so certain, so secure. All I could think about was the gnawing uncertainty inside me. All I could hear was that voice screaming, "Times, he's going to leave you. You're not what he thinks you are. It's only a matter of time." Asterisk. I drank too much champagne trying to make the voice shut up. It didn't work. It just made me feel more disconnected, like I was watching my life from outside my own body. A guy started talking to me at the bar. He was a carbon copy of every man I'd ever dated before: slick hair, expensive watch, an easy, meaningless smile. He said all the empty things I was used to hearing. It wasn't exciting. It wasn't a temptation. It was familiar. It felt like slipping back into the role I knew how to play. The conversation meant nothing. He meant nothing. He was a ghost. But for a few minutes, talking to him felt like an escape from the crushing fear that I was about to lose everything I truly loved. It was a stupid, pathetic, and desperate act of self-destruction. It was me pressing the red button just to prove it was real. I was so convinced I was going to fail, so sure I was going to hurt him, that I did it myself first. It was the ultimate act of cowardice. I murdered my own happiness before anything else could. I woke up the next morning with a pit in my stomach so deep I thought I might actually be sick. The shame was a physical weight. He was in the kitchen making coffee, humming a song he liked. He smiled at me, and I felt like a monster. I swore to myself I would bury it. I would delete the memory, lock it away, and spend the rest of my life making it up to him being the person he deserved. It was a disgusting, selfish plan, but it was the only one I had. Then my phone buzzed on the nightstand. My heart stopped. It was a text from the guy from the bar. Something stupid. Last night was fun. We should do it again. My blood ran cold. It wasn't a memory anymore. It was evidence. It was proof of the crime I had committed against the only person I had ever truly loved. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock the screen. I had to delete it. I had to erase it before it could ruin everything. I just had to hit delete, and this nightmare would be over. I fumbled with the phone, my thumb hovering over the trash icon. Just as I was about to press it, he walked into the bedroom holding a mug of coffee for me. He saw the look on my face. The pure, unfiltered panic. "You okay?" he asked, his smile fading. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I couldn't speak. I just stared at him, my heart pounding in my ears. He put the mug down and walked toward me, his brow furrowed with concern. He glanced down at my hands, at the phone gripped so tight my knuckles were white. Before I could hide it, before I could do anything, he gently took it from me. He didn't read it right away. For a second, he just held the phone, looking from it to me, his face full of confusion. He trusted me. The idea that there could be something bad on there probably didn't even cross his mind. He was just trying to figure out why I looked so terrified. Then his eyes dropped to the screen. I watched his face as he read the words. It was like watching a statue crack. First, nothing. He just went completely vacant, his expression wiped clean. All the warmth, all the love I was used to seeing there just vanished. The air in the room got cold and thin. He put the phone down on the nightstand, very gently, like it was a bomb. He didn't look at me. He just turned and walked out of the bedroom. That silence was the loudest sound I've ever heard. It was 1,000 times worse than screaming. I followed him into the living room, a pathetic weight escaping my lips. He was just standing by the window, looking out at the street, his back to me. "Who is he?" he asked. His voice was flat. "Dead." It meant nothing. I choked out the words, feeling like poison. It was a mistake. One stupid mistake. He finally turned around, and the look on his face broke me. It wasn't anger yet. It was something much deeper. It was a kind of disbelief, like I had just told him the sky was green. He looked at me like he'd never seen me before. "A mistake," he repeated, his voice quiet. "You made a choice, Vanessa. This was a choice." And then the yelling started. It wasn't just him, it was me. I was sobbing, begging, trying to explain the mess in my head, the fear, the self-sabotage, the voice that told me I was going to ruin everything. But it all just sounded like excuses. Pathetic, selfish excuses. He wasn't hearing my reasons. He was just hearing the truth. I had shattered his trust. I had taken the one pure good thing in my life and destroyed it for no reason at all. Our fight wasn't a performance for the neighbors, though I'm sure they heard every word. It was the sound of my soul literally tearing itself in two. The good part that loved him and the broken part that had just killed him. He said it was over. He said he couldn't even look at me. Then he walked back into the bedroom, packed a bag, and left. I collapsed on the floor, crying so hard I couldn't breathe. I thought that was the worst it could get. I was wrong. The next day I went to my parents' house, just desperate for somewhere to go. When I came back to the apartment that evening, it was half empty. His clothes were gone. His books were gone. The stupid, ugly painting he loved was gone from the wall. He had taken his entire life out of ours while I wasn't there. He had erased himself. That's when I made my choice. He chose to leave and I chose to fight. In the world I grew up in, you don't just let things go, you fix them. You prove your worth. If something is broken, you throw money and effort at it until it's whole again. I thought his silence was a test. He was hurting and he needed to see how much I loved him. He needed proof. So I started sending the gifts. First it was flowers to his office. A huge bouquet with a card that just said, "I'm sorry. I love you." Then I sent a first edition copy of his favorite book to his new place. I had to get the address from one of his friends. I wrote letters, pages and pages of them, pouring out everything I couldn't say during our fight. I explained the fear, my feelings of not being good enough, how my love for him was so big it scared me into doing the dumbest thing in the world. He never responded. The silence continued. So I tried harder. I thought he needs to see times me. He needs to know I won't just disappear, that I won't give up. I knew his routine. I knew which coffee shop he went to in the morning, which bar he and his friends went to on Fridays. I'd go with my friends and we'd just happen to be there. I'd try to catch his eye just to give him a small, sad smile to show him I was still here, still fighting for us. He would just turn and walk away. I wasn't stalking him. In my messed up head, I was making a grand gesture. I was trying to scream, "I love you," across the canyon of silence he had built between us. I asked my friends to talk to him, to tell him how devastated I was, to tell him that he was my whole world. They did, but it only made things worse. He told them to tell me to stop. But I couldn't. Giving up felt like admitting that he was right, that I didn't love him enough. Persistence was how I had been taught to show devotion. You don't take no for an answer. You wear them down with the sheer force of your love. I see now how crazy that sounds, but at the time it was the only logic I understood. I thought his anger was a wall I just had to be strong enough to break down. The final blow didn't come from him. It came from my mother. She called me one afternoon. Her tone was serious, the same one she used when a business deal went south. "Vanessa," she said, no warmth in her voice. "I spoke with his mother. You need to stop." My blood ran cold. "What? Why?" "You're hurting him," she said, and the words hit me like a physical slap. "This isn't helping. You're scaring him. All these things you're doing. The letters, the showing up. It's not love. It's harassment. You have to leave him alone. It's over." Hearing it from her, the woman who taught me that the solution to any problem was to be relentless, to take what you want, to never show weakness, it broke through all my delusions. She was the one who always told me to fight, and now she was telling me to surrender. I hung up the phone and just sat there in silence. And for the first time I saw myself through his eyes. The gifts weren't romantic. They were intrusions. The letters weren't apologies. They were demands for attention. My presence wasn't a reminder of my love. It was a threat. My grand gestures weren't a testament to my devotion. They were deeply, profoundly selfish. I wasn't the heartbroken girl fighting for the love of her life. I was the monster under his bed. I was the villain in his story. I finally understood. The silence he wanted wasn't a test for me to pass. It was his new reality. A reality he needed to build to protect himself from me. And I wasn't in it. I was never going to be in it again.